This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about that ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Damian Sassower in for Paul Sweeney. Paul Sweeney in Nashville, breaking into the Pancake Pantry in about 25 minutes with Alex Steele. Day 2 in Nashville. Thanks to BNY Mellon for hosting them down there. They're having some interesting conversations about the pulse of America. Maybe it's a pulse of inflation. And to go to Damian right now, folks, a huge plate set today. All sorts of angles we're going to take here. But, Damian, I got to go to your EM expertise. Yep. And off the India vote, where I see 23% rice inflation around the world, I see EM currencies quietly slipping away. No one is talking about it.
Slipping away. I actually see a bit of a rebound this morning. I mean, we saw some pretty big losses in the Mex peso and the Indian rupee yesterday. We're bouncing back here. I mean, look, the reality is this. I think the markets are positioning for a low vol summer. And if that's the case, it's time to load up on a carry trade. And I think we're seeing some evidence of that.
What about more EME, like Philippine peso? We're beginning to talk about 60 or Indonesia rupiah. I look at even Brazilian real, which is, it's finally backing up a little.
Yeah. No, Lula's been a cause for concern there. I mean, but, you've got markets, Senegal, Kenya, Serbia, they're all tapping the capital markets today, tomorrow.
Who are they tapping? The American taxpayer?
They're tapping the American taxpayer. That's right. These are dollar bonds. Well, certainly in the case of Senegal and Kenya's planning another buyback of its bonds. That'll be dollar debt. So, yeah, there's still demand for that paper.
Lisa, we don't have to go away for the summer. We can just talk to Damian about all these romantic places. And,
You're romantic,
I will be fulfilled.
It'll be great.
Live
I can get my bow tie straight.
Good morning.
Good morning on YouTube. Search Bloomberg Podcast. Subscribe there. We're really humbled by the YouTube success. Thank you so much. It's building each and every month out in the live chat. I'll get out in the YouTube live chat in a moment. On Apple CarPlay, huge response yesterday on Apple CarPlay to our interview with Raghuram Rajan of the Booth School, Chicago, on his India. Just thank you so much for that response. Again, Apple CarPlay globally as well. It's the Interactive Broker Studios. The future's up 10. A Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Got it. Yeah, futures are advancing. Signs of a cooling U.S. labor market have fueled those higher odds of Federal Reserve interest rate cuts beginning as soon as November. Now, the U.S. stats show job openings at the lowest since 2021. Today, we're going to get a read on private payroll figures and the latest report on the U.S. services sector. So we have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, Dow and S&P futures both up 0.1%. Treasury yields coming off their largest two-day drop of the year. We have the two-year yield at 4.78%. That's up a basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.34%, and that's up a basis point as well. And we have shares of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise higher, up 13% this morning. The company set for its biggest gain since 2016, and this was after its revenue beat estimates thanks to a big jump in AI server sales. We have Intel up nearly 1%. It's agreed to sell a stake in a venture that controls a plant in Ireland to Apollo Global Management for $11 billion. And we'll stick with tech. We'll go to Apple. Those shares ticking just a bit higher, up 0.3%, but it's putting the stock on track to gain for an 8th consecutive session, its longest winning streak since March of 2022. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. We start strong, and we start strong this morning because of the trillions of dollars that's in short-term paper. Her idea of long-term is a 2-year piece, the 2-year note. Deborah Cunningham joins us, truly a globally expert on liquidity and short-term paper, Federated Hermes. Deborah, I've got to ask the retail question this morning, and I guess Global Wall Street's interested as well. With this move in yields lower, with the zeitgeist of finally a labor market starting to crack, is the yield now on short-term paper as good as it's going to get?
I think we've been in that position now, Tom, for most of 2024. Money market fund yields and short-term, short 2-year and under, even the long bond for my world, the 2-year paper have already, been at their highs, I think. But by the same token, because of the weighted average maturities of money market funds and short-term products, the yields really haven't moved off of those highs. You have commercial paper type products up in the, 5, 560, 555, 560 range, and government type paper in the 535, 540 range. So they've been a plateau for most of 2024.
I mean, you're inexperienced, but I look at Steve Auth, as grizzled as he is. He's been with Federated Hermes out in Pittsburgh since Washington surveyed the place in about 1740. When you talk to Steve Auth about when the tide moves in money market funds, what's a signal you're looking at, Deborah Cunningham, to know now is when the cash moves out of money market funds?
I really think it has to do with you can't move till you see the first move. So although people anticipate and try to talk about the extension trade and debate all day long about when that should happen, nobody really does it until you see the whites of their eyes. So in this market, that means when the Fed makes the first move. So we're talking fourth quarter of this year, Tom. I don't think it happens much before then.
We now rip up the script with Deborah Cunningham of Pittsburgh and Federated. Deborah, Pittsburgh Pirates 1, Los Angeles Dodgers 0.
Yes.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle. We have two phenom pitchers, one last night, one coming tonight, as long as it doesn't pour down rain here at PNC Park, we'll see. But yes, and the best part about PNC Park and the Pittsburgh Pirates, Tom, is when it pans out from the behind the plate to the outfield, it goes straight to the Federated Hermes.
It does. I see you waving there as well and hoping Mookie Betts strikes out.
Well,
Damian?
Tom, the good thing about the Pittsburgh Pirates is they don't have to face the Yankees more than just a handful of times during the season. But let's save the interview, Debbie. Let's talk about the plumbing of U.S. financial markets. Let's talk about the TGA, the Reserve Repo Facility, Fed runoff. What are your expectations as we push into the second half of this year? Where do you see the pockets of risk building?
Well, I think there's a couple things. First of all, I don't think the RRP is at all a problem. I think that it could be at zero, and I think the facility will still be outstanding. I don't think it goes to zero. I think it probably has a natural, sort of floor where it is right now, $400 to $500 billion level. And I think that just has to do with a large group of counterparts who aren't seeking to go elsewhere. Having said that, the Fed actually started their purchase program, and this is for less liquid segments of the marketplace. Maybe that takes a little bit of the supply out of the repo market, so it starts to build that RRP back up a little bit to some degree.
Yes.
Although I don't think it's a whole lot at this point. Similar with they're cutting back on QT, which they started again in the month of June. All those are minor tweaks, though. I think probably what you look at as the next potential real risk in the money markets is not coming until next year, when you've got, again, a debt ceiling sort of showdown.
Right.
Despite the fact that we know how it will end in a good way, there's a lot of turmoil that happens, in the process.
Debbie, all central banks follow the Fed. In your last note, you mentioned the Swedes and the Swiss and cutting rates being a little bit early here. We've got Canada at 9:45 today. I mean, what are your expectations as we look to the Bank of Canada, as we look to Australia, as we look to the ECB tomorrow? I mean, can we really see central bank divergence pick up and accelerate here?
I think Canada and Australia are not on that path yet. I think they could potentially move between now and when the Fed actually makes its first move, but I don't think it's happening this week. The ECB, on the other hand, I think quite possibly could. I mean, I think it's maybe at best a 50-50 shot at this point, but I do believe they will be, one of the next movers. So not everybody follows the Fed, and in this case, I think that's a reflection of different dynamics from an economic situation standpoint, and different impacts from a global perspective.
Deborah Cunningham, quickly here, it's maybe not your world because it's more long-term paper, but is 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% the world of Federated Hermes, is that still germane? Is 60-40 work given the topsy-turvy world you're living in?
We are definitely a 60-40 type of baseline firm, Tom.
Somebody would say you invented it, but continue.
It's the potential, yes. It's sort of like the Fourth River in Pittsburgh. And yet I think what is key in that 60-40 is having a component of the 60 in something that's a little less traditional, and having a component in the 40 in something that's a little less traditional. Maybe you're looking at loans, maybe you're looking at emerging markets, something that is off the beaten path of just high grade or high yield.
Right. Thank you so much, Deborah Cunningham. Greatly appreciate getting us started here on where everybody is, parked in 5% plus cash. Futures up 9. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, Damian, Lisa, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is gearing up for coalition talks after his party lost its majority in parliament, forcing him to rely on allies to form a government for the first time since he stormed power a decade ago. Modi's BJP needs to secure the support of 2 regional allies to stay in office for a 3rd term. More with Bloomberg's Europe, Middle East, and Africa News Director, Rosalind Matheson.
He does have these difficult negotiations going on today in New Delhi with 2 of his key alliance partners. And these are veteran politicians of big states who have pulled out of his alliance before and come back. So they're a bit fickle, one could say, and no doubt they're going to be ready to drive a hard bargain in order to promise their loyalty to him. They are saying publicly their intent is to work with him to form a government, but no doubt behind the scenes they'll be negotiating heavily to do so.
Bloomberg's Ros Matheson. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer sparred over taxes, the cost of living, and the country's health system in a televised debate. It is ahead of a July 4th election. President Biden's sweeping executive action on immigration took effect. It puts a cap on the number of migrants allowed to seek asylum, clearing the way for deportations. They're hoping the 3rd time is the charm. Boeing will try again to launch its long-delayed space taxi with the vehicle's first human crew for NASA. It follows weeks of delays over technical issues and 2 called-off launch attempts. Astronaut Laurel O'Hara says while it has been a letdown for the crew,
you're just really focused on the duties that lay ahead of you, and you're ready for anything that might happen.
Astronauts Bush Wilmore and Sonny Williams hope today's countdown gets all the way to 0 and lift off just before 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Bloomberg Surveillance from New York. A really full palette here for the next 3 hours. It's time for golf talk. 15 years old in Detroit. The Rocket Mortgage Tournament, and the kid's 15 years old. This is exciting.
It is exciting. It'll be exciting to see him out there. But, I mean, look, we're really
He's
looking
a freshman.
We're looking to the PGA Memorial this weekend. It's the tune-up for the US Open. I mean, Pinehurst #2, North Carolina, coming the week after next.
Did you see your nostrils flare?
I
love it.
Is to say road trip, Mr. Sassower?
I mean, I don't think I'm going to get that look. But, you know, I mean, look, even this weekend, Weirfield, Ohio, I think Victor Hovland's the reigning champ. I mean, there's plenty of good golf to be had over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's go.
How does a 15-year-old kid make the Corn Ferry cut? And, like, is this like a gimmick or is he real?
He has that new putting grip, I hear. You know, the Japanese putting grip where you hold it. It's hard for me to replicate here in the office because I'm more of
It's tough on radio.
I'm a left-hand low kind of guy, so...
No, I mean, listen, I've got my fingers crossed for this young man, and I want to see him do well.
Some Jacksonville Beach,
Sign him to some
Florida.
NIL.
Yeah.
You know, by the way, Tom, you know, Mr. Barr and I are going to get the opportunity to interview WNBA Hall of Famer Cheryl Swoops. Let's go.
Sorry.
Very cool. When does this happen?
Can we
Soon?
say that? I don't know, soon.
Well,
I hope
soon.
people will tell you.
I'm going to ask our producers.
Bloomberg Business of Sports, led by Scarlett Fu, with Damian Sassower and Michael Barr as well. Futures up 10, NASDAQ up 0.4% from New York. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after a decline in U.S. job openings. Boosted those bets on Fed rate cuts this year. We have more jobs data on tap for today. 8:15 a.m. Wall Street time, we'll get ADP's private employment report. We'll also get the ISM Services Index. That comes out at 10 a.m. And then tomorrow, we're on to weekly jobless claims and then May payrolls on Friday. In the meantime, this morning, the MBA said its mortgage applications index, that fell for a second week in a row. The average 30-year fixed rate also ticked higher at 7.07% last week. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, S&P futures up 0.2%, Dow futures up 0.1%. The two-year yield at 4.78%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.34%, and that's up a basis point. Shares of Dollar Tree this morning lower, down 2%. The company says it's looking into a possible sale, even spin-off of its Family Dollar business. It also reported weaker than expected comparable sales for its first quarter and cut its annual EPS forecast. And Bloomberg reporting eBay will drop American Express cards as a payment option because of, quote, unacceptably high fees. eBay down about 0.2%, American Express up 0.1%. And finally, sources saying Elliott Management has rebuilt a more than $2 billion stake in SoftBank and is pushing the company to launch a $15 billion stock buyback. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Elisa Mateo, thanks so much. Damian Sassower in for Paul Sweeney. You'll hear Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele from Nashville here with Economic Tate at the 10 o'clock hour. This is a really important interview. We've got lots of equity coverage today. Gina Martin Adams says, be in the market, participate. Liz Ann Saunders will join from Charles Schwab, be in the market and participate. And Greg Bottle has been more cautious. There's no other way to put it. He's at BNP Paribas. The market lifts. He's got a new updated note underlining his caution. Again, we're thrilled he could join this morning. Where are you on SPX out 12 months? Let's just get the measure of the land.
Yeah, we have a 51.50 year-end target, but there's obviously a lot of water under the bridge for year-end. But 51.50, so lower from current spot, but modestly lower.
Key question. The market is just in the last 72 hours, is beginning to turn in a volatile way. Economic data comes in, yields come in, there's some angst out there. When stocks go down, is there any place to hide in stocks?
I think it's challenging to hide in stocks because if you want to get into defensive equities, are you better off in the fixed income market? It's not obvious with this new kind of higher normal level of rates that there are as many hiding places in equities as there were. If you scan for quality corporates, which is the obvious place to hide in a slowing economy, those valuations are already rich.
So do you go to cash? I mean, that's the arch question.
I think it's something that you can do, or you can think about having exposure to those equities you like and trying to hedge it.
You know, last week we saw the VIX close above 14. Even yesterday, I think we touched it. But you know, today we're back down to 13 and below 13. I mean, you're talking about a summer lull in volatility. When I hear summer lull in volatility, Tom, I think carry trade. Well, that too. But I think of the EM carry trade. I mean, talk to us about some of those. I mean, we're taught to take what the market gives you. You know, in a low vol environment, what is the market giving us here?
So what we have is this slightly self-perpetuating volatility cycle. We've described it as late cycle exuberance in the vol market, where you have this depressed level of volatility. People start to sell more volatility. It leaves dealers loaded with gamma, which suppresses volatility further. So the thing that we think about when we think about carry trades is trying to structure carry trades that can take advantage of that, but don't get you short the tail when you're at very low levels of vol. And we do know that there are a lot of risks on the horizon.
So is a cross-trade NVIDIA GameStop doable?
Well, you talk about the tails. I mean, let's talk about tail hedges, right? I mean, like, what is a tail hedge to protect against a Fed that's, you know, keeping the base rate higher for longer?
So I think when we think about tail hedges and equities, the easiest and most obvious place to go is the VIX. We have low spot levels of VIX, as you alluded to, and we have low levels of VIX volatility. So our base case is that these low levels of volatility can persist through the summer, but we do think you can get attractive tail hedges. Now, the nature of a tail hedge is you don't actually expect it to pay.
Right.
Cheap. But when you need it, it's there. So we do think that call spreads in the VIX line up as a very low premium, high leveraged hedge.
Let me just, I mean, I hate to ask, but, you know, Lisa Mateo just emailed me and she says, what in God's name is a tail hedge? Can mere mortals do this, or is this the land of fancy guys eating baked Lay's potato chips, barbecue?
So a tail hedge just refers to the tail of the distribution, i.e. the lower probability events. So therefore, something we do not expect to happen, but clearly there's a probability, and you can think about, is that probability well priced?
Damian, do you spend your gain by hedging the tail?
I try to calculate areas under the curve all day long, Tom, and that 2.5 or 5% tail on the extreme, that's something that we really focus on. But I just want to ask Greg here something about looking out over the next, let's say, 2 months.
Yeah.
We knew it was NVIDIA earnings. We knew it was tomorrow, this Friday's payroll numbers. We can see through the forward curve which days, right, using daily options, are going to spike, where vol's expected to spike. Look out over the next 2 months. What are the dates that we should be most focused on?
So, the key catalysts are the obvious macro ones. Next week we get CPI and the FOMC on the same day. We get payrolls the back end of this week. Labor market is obviously the key indicator we're looking at. But we have to be careful isolating those events and spending premium, because it's not really a surprise. That's what everyone is looking at.
Right.
And what we've seen in the macro data has been a cooling off, but a cooling off from a hot level. And that's first order benign for vol.
Yeah. No, look, this is really interesting stuff, Tom, because, what it's telling me is, to Greg's point, there aren't a lot of real hardcore events. In fact, you just mentioned that FOMC and CPI are on the same day. So there's really only a handful of real hot spots looking out over the summer months. So I agree with you. We might see vols compress here into the end of the summer, right?
Yeah, the other thing that people are obviously focused on more is the US elections. Could the US elections inject volatility? If you go back and look at election years historically, you get volatility priced for the election itself, but the summer before the election, you tend to get a big lull in volatility, calm before the storm, if you like.
Right. I got to ask this question. It goes outside your remit, but I'm sure Greg Baldo can do this with BNP Economics as well. Anna Wong is in the zeitgeist with her study of birth-death rate. She says it's baloney numbers. Quote, our view that non-farm payroll data for last year are facing large downward revisions. Is that the secret, the mystery base case for Greg Baldo's call?
Probably not, no. Demographics matter, but the issue of demographics is it's not just birth and death, it's also immigration, which brings you back into the election and the political events that we've been talking about now. So the idea of having good supply of labor is something that can help rein in inflation and help growth, so it matters.
Greg, do you get concerned about concentration risk? Do you get concerned when you hear about the Mag 7, when you hear about NVIDIA and,
Okay, let me interrupt. Michael Mauboussin publishing last night on concentration. I'll get that out. Go.
Isn't every ETF got 5 to 6% NVIDIA in there? Talk to us about what happens if something I don't know, a comet hits NVIDIA.
Well, look at Dell. Look at Dell yesterday, a couple days ago.
Microsoft too.
Yeah, concentration is absolutely a risk, but this is not something new. This is something that has been going on for the last couple of years now.
Right.
Bigger stocks getting bigger. So it matters, but what I'm more concerned about is correlation than concentration, because even though we've had these largest names increase in weight, they've been decorrelated from more traditional old economy parts of the market. So the risk I'm more worried about is if these things go in the same direction at the same time.
Okay, Lisa, help me here. Greg thinks we had a minute to talk about stocks and what the markets are going to do. It's a double barrel, folks.
Let's talk about
Greg,
Emerson.
We
let me
tricked
think.
them.
BNP Paribas Olympics. Lisa wants to be on the river when the boats go down the river. Can you slot her into BNP Paribas there?
We'll see what we
next
can
to
do.
Notre Dame.
We'll see what we can do.
Double barrel. And then there's the U.S. Open tennis. You guys doing it again?
Well, tennis is obviously a sport BNP are very involved in, so put the request
the plant
in,
out
we'll
in
see what we can
Arizona,
do.
California rather.
Roland Garros.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Greg Baldo, with us this morning. That's important, folks. There's a lot of people that come in that say participate, and Mr. Baldo's notes really intelligent about how do you participate with caution along the way. Some people are reading that very carefully. What are your thoughts?
I really wanted to ask him what's going on in some of the single name equities. And, I guess it's more of a question for BNP Paribas Equity senior salesman, Michael Bachman. Shout out to you. Because what I really want to know is what is the buy side thinking here? Are they just closing up shop, closing up their books and playing golf, going to the beach?
Well, there's a lot of good data here. I know Goldman Sachs has some good data on it. And the answer is they're selling tech.
Okay.
That's what they're doing.
I'm buying puts. I'm writing calls.
This Wednesday morning. Damian Sassower and Tom Keene to get you started on Apple CarPlay. Thank you for listening. Huge response on Apple CarPlay yesterday to our Indian coverage. Thank you, Derek Walbank, for your leadership out of New Delhi. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning. at the top of the
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures edging higher. Treasury yields gaining after their largest two-day drop this year. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, 87 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 12 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 47 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.78%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.33%, and that is little changed. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher at $2,334 an ounce. Brent crude $77 a barrel. WTI crude at $73 a barrel. Psychedelic stocks falling. The drug MDMA, it failed to get that backing from U.S. regulatory advisors to treat PTSD. We have Mind Medicine down 13%, Compass Pathways down 11%. And then we move over to personal styling company Stitch Fix. They're up 13%. The company reported narrower loss per share from continuing operations in the third quarter than analysts had expected. And then in other news, BlackRock, Citadel, and others, they're backing an upstart Texas stock market targeted to rival the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. It's TXSC. It'll be based in Dallas. Has raised $120 million and plans to register with the SEC. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Damian Sassower is all excited to talk, debt and where we are in bonds and all that. Our next guest is wildly eclectic. One of the equivalencies I can see in New York City's John Gray over at a private finance shop. But Eric Rosen joins us right now with a heritage on Wall Street and with public service to Cornell Hospital and pediatric neurology to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, now ensconced in Florida. I mentioned Hobe Sound there earlier. I'm fascinated, Eric Rosen, and I think all of Global Wall Street is, on the continuing boom of Florida. How does it end?
Well, listen, first, thanks for having me on the show, but Florida is hot, right? At the wealth that has come to Florida has been incredible. I moved down 7 years ago. Houses have basically tripled and in some cases quadrupled. When you look at what's happened in my community, you're basically seeing 3 to 5 times up, depending on what it is, and the highest end.
How does it continue?
Well, I think you're seeing right now the wealth is slowing down in terms of the migration has slowed, right? The huge numbers in 2021 and 2022 have slowed down, but inventory is light. I think you're going to see some correction just because it's gotten so out of control, and you're starting to see more lower-end homes be impacted. Higher rates, higher insurance costs. Insurance costs in many houses have tripled in the last 4 or 5 years. It's getting harder to get into schools. So a lot of families, you have 3 or 4 kids in school in a nice school in New York City, you want to get your kids into school in Florida. I think it's...
Damian, that's what I hear.
Tom, what I really want to know is how many homes Jamie Dimon owns in Florida, because I don't know if our audience is aware, but Eric Rosen, and by the way, the Rosen Report on Substack, Eric Rosen, before he moved to Miami, was the head of credit trading for J.P. Morgan, for Jamie himself, and then he ran FIC for UBS. He had a few jobs there. But talk to me about where we are in the interest rate cycle, Eric. Talk to me about cutting rates. Is that not always good for markets?
Well, listen, I mean, if you go back in history, look at what happened at the dot-com bubble. NASDAQ peaked in March of 2000. Rates started getting cut in 2001. It ended with the NASDAQ down 78% in 2002. Do rate cuts always mean positive things? Let's look at the global financial crisis. Ben Bernanke said in March of 2007, subprime is contained. Don't think that was right. Cuts started in September of 2007. S&P peaked in October of 2007. And then it was down 58% by March of 2009. So rate cuts are a good thing, but why are you cutting rates? And if you have to cut really aggressively, it not necessarily is a good thing.
Well, Tom, Eric, by the way, the Rosen Report's amazing. I'm a big fan. And you just had a private credit panel on, and I just want to kind of hit you back on the private credit markets. Everyone thinks of private credit as this new asset class. And, what you've been saying, Eric, for a long, long time is, my goodness, you were doing this back in the 80s at J.P. Morgan. It's just, it was called something different. Talk to us a little bit about this $1.7 trillion beast and what the risk is there that everyone's talking about.
Well, listen, private credit is growing exponentially. Banks are pulling back and lending, regulatory issues, capital issues. And private credit's real. It's not new. I started my career actually at Continental Bank in the early 90s, but I started doing private credit a long time ago. And in my hedge fund, we did a lot of it. And I do it today. And a big portion of my net worth is in private credit deals. I think it's real. But I think if you're going to allocate to it, you have to, number one, realize it's illiquid. And number two, realize... Go ahead.
No, please, continue.
We're going to see a cycle. And when you see a cycle, the thing I like about investing is you have optionality. If you go buy a stock and you don't like it, you can get out of it. Well, if you buy private credit, it's harder. There's not a lot of liquidity.
Right now, private equity, private credit, we've got extend and pretend. How does that market clear? How do you see unfolding where things where they want to exit now or exit in a year, they can't? How does that unfold out 4 or 5 years?
Well, we're going to go through a cycle. It seems like eventually we're going to have another cycle. And when you do, you want to be with a manager that has restructuring expertise and knows how to get through tough times, because at the end of the day, they can't hit a button and sell it like they can a treasury bond or a liquid stock. And so you got to wear it, you buy it, you wear it, and you're going to have to work it out. And so there is a very good chance we're going to see a cycle at some point in my life, because they tend to happen pretty frequently. And we've been fortunate, absent COVID, we haven't seen one in a little while, but it's coming.
Eric, I know a lot of people who read the Rosen Report, who follow your work. You know, Jamie Dimon's one of them. I have to ask you, I mean, do you still talk to a lot of people at JP Morgan? I mean, talk to me about the bathroom situation at JP Morgan. Let's go back a few years. I mean, I think, Tom, they call the bathroom, the men's room at JP Morgan on the trading floor, the Eric Rosen Memorial Bathroom, if I'm not mistaken. Eric, is that right?
Well, that's a funny story, but yes, I was fortunate enough to be included in the alumni dinner last week, where Jamie was
What did you learn from Mr. Dimon in the dinner?
You know, Jamie is the best leader on the planet when it comes to, you know, CEOs, in my opinion, and he was very well versed on everything going on in the world. He was a little bit cautious on what's going on geopolitically, but you know, always still pretty positive. But the bathroom story, it was 2008, early 2009. My business is doing well. We were short everything. And he calls me to go to lunch. We sit down for lunch. He said, what can we do? What can I do for you? What do you need? And I said, I've got a strange request. I can't believe I'm going to ask you this, but my business has grown. You need to do something about our bathrooms. Our bathrooms are disgusting. I can't bring anyone. A client cannot go to my bathrooms on my floor. They're disgusting. And he said, I don't believe you. I said, okay, well, from lunch, he goes, we're going to go from lunch. I know that at 1:30 every day, there's a problem in the bathroom and they flood. So it's only 1:10 and I have to kill time. We go to the bathroom at 1:35. He opens up the door and he steps in a flooded bathroom.
Well, we'll keep it there. What you want to know, folks, is this is on the edge of Fenway Park, about 1985. Eric Rosen, I want to look at the advantages you have, and there's so many people out there that have not participated in this post-pandemic boom. How do people catch up? The people on the sidelines, they're afraid. They don't have your Chicago parchment. They don't have this, they don't have that, but they want to catch up. How do they catch up?
I think the first thing when I look at the consumer is you have to have fiscal responsibility. And my problem with the consumers today, we live in an instant gratification society, and they see something on Instagram and they buy it instantaneously. You're looking at debt at all-time highs, buy now, pay later. We're seeing rising credit card delinquencies, rising auto delinquencies. You have to put off purchases that you don't absolutely need. And I think social media has really hurt the consumer. And I'm guilty. I'll flip through something on social media and I'm like, oh, I'll buy it. And you don't really need it and you're forced to buy it. And I think consumers and quite frankly, the US government need to be more.
This is brilliant. I deal with this every day, Damian, with the various and sundry children I admit to, and that it's like it's in their face, on their phone. I'm like, Well,
a lot of this is in your face, Tom, but what, Eric points out, and, I was just reading his latest report, he's talking about concentration risk. We were just talking about it with our last guest, with Greg. I mean, NVIDIA's in everyone's ETF. They're in everyone's portfolio, are they not?
So are we under-diversified now?
Well, this is what I'd say. If you want to be uber wealthy, take concentrated risk. Look at the top 10 in the Forbes 400. Every one of them has taken very concentrated risk, which is fine. They're controlling their own situation. My concern is, does the U.S. consumer and the basic investor understand the risks they're taking? And so I wrote a piece last week about concentrations, and I'll give you XLK ETF, $65 billion. 44% is in Microsoft and Apple. If you include NVIDIA, it's over 50%. Take a Fidelity Blue Chip Growth, $63 billion fund. 57% is in the top 10.
Well, yeah, like what Will Danoff's doing up there with contrafunds. Same thing.
There's the number of funds that have 30% concentration in NVIDIA. I just want you to know it so you understand that it works when it works, and when it doesn't work, you're concentrated.
Eric Rosen, Damian Sassower, Tom Keene. We're going to go read Morgan Stanley's Michael Mauboussin, his published last night exactly on this, the concentration we're all living in the markets. What's the Substack again, Damian?
I don't know. What is Substack, Eric?
What's it called?
Eric Rosen at Substack. If you just Google Eric Rosen at Substack, you'll find me free.
Right.
It's free. Just put it in your email.
Eric, thank you for your philanthropy to New York City as well, and particularly in pediatric neurology at Cornell. Eric Rosen is from Florida. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. More testimony will take place today in the trial of Hunter Biden with the ex-wife of the president's son on the stand. The president's son is accused of lying about his drug addiction to illegally purchase a firearm in 2018. An emotional first day in the trial of Hunter Biden. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden and Hunter Biden's current wife were in the Delaware court. Prosecutors and an FBI agent witness played long clips of Biden's 2021 audiobook of his memoirs, in which he narrated his descent into finding crack. Former federal prosecutor Tom Dupree.
Prosecutors will tell you that there are few things more effective before a jury than being able to show the jury what the defendant said. In this case, hearing the defendant's own voice.
Biden's defense argued the president's son didn't knowingly make false statements because he was seeking sobriety and, like other addicts, experienced a deep state of denial. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is gearing up for a coalition for talks after his ruling party lost its majority in parliament. It forces him to rely on allies to form a government. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer sparred over taxes, the cost of living, and the country's health system in a televised debate. Sunak on the ITV debate.
Beyond raising your taxes and raiding your pensions, no one knows what Labour would actually do. But you know what I would do. I'll cut your taxes, protect your pension, and reduce immigration.
Keir Starmer.
This election is all about a choice. More of the chaos and division we've seen for the last 14 years, or turning the page and rebuilding with Labour.
The debate to be the next prime minister is ahead of a July 4th election. Top scientists calculate that the Earth is warming hit an all-time high in 2023. According to the study, 92% of last year's surprising record-shattering heat was caused by humans. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Damian, I thought that was brilliant with Eric Rosen. It really speaks to Florida, where the middle class and the poor are leaving the state, moving north to Georgia.
Not of their own
and North
volition.
Carolina. They've been priced right out of it. There's some drought issues, and there's some politics in there we don't need to get into. But the answer is for Mr. Rosen. I got the idea that the Wall Street boom, the Wall Street exodus there. And am I right that there's only one factor in the equation? No taxes.
Well, and that speaks to Texas as well. I don't know if you saw the news that just hit this morning. I think a few big names. They're supporting a new stock exchange in Texas. The Texas Stock Exchange.
You know why this is?
No taxes.
No, it's because Critty Gupta went to SMU, and Jess Menton she's a fighting Texas Aggie. They figure if they do a Texas market, they can get Critty and Jess down there.
Go Longhorns. Well, look, I mean, like to your point, these tax low jurisdictions like Florida and Texas are real, and they're obviously seeing a lot of migration inward. And to your point, it's those lower income classes that are basically being squeezed out. It's
a serious issue, folks. And what I love that I heard there, and I've heard this from others, the absolute determinant for people with offspring is the schools. I mean, if you can't get into schools down there, what's the point?
And it's private. You have to go to private schools there.
Well, it's a decision people make. And
at least in Florida.
The answer is the schools are packed because it's all happened so quickly. It's fascinating.
Not like the beaches, though.
We think, Mike McGlone and others that are smarter than we are. Is the golf good down there?
It's not this time of year. It's a little bit hot. A little hot and muggy this time of year, so I don't think it's probably optimal.
But are they like
ball won't carry
courses?
as much. Oh, beautiful. The grass. I mean, Florida golf is the best. I mean,
you ever had an alligator
going to
on
be
the course?
Below 90. An alligator? No, I've never seen an alligator. My grandfather had, though.
Oh, okay. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after decline in U.S. job openings boosted those bets on Fed rate cuts this year. We have the NASDAQ futures up 0.5% or 104 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 83 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, 15 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.77%, little changed. The yield on the 10-year, 4.33%, and that is little changed. Few companies making news. That's starting with Boeing. Their shares little changed, but it's going to try to launch its long-delayed space taxi today with its first human crew for NASA. Starliner expected to launch at 10:52 a.m. from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Bloomberg will carry it live. Be sure to tune in for that. And the Amazon Labor Union moving toward an affiliation with the Teamsters. If an alliance is formed, it could put more pressure on Amazon to negotiate with workers at a warehouse in New York City. We have Amazon up about 0.5%. And Elon Musk confirmed that he diverted AI chips away from Tesla to X and XAI, and this is after a CNBC report. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Damian Sassower in for Paul Sweeney. He is in Nashville, ensconced with Alex Steele. And I don't know, the Ryman Auditorium, Grand Ole Opry, whatever. I know they got Pancake Pantry. They're there right now. No doubt having the vodka grapefruit spritz or whatever it is, Alex has. Damian, if we break down here, if yields drive lower, the real yield goes under 2%, what happens?
Well, what it means is that people are buying duration, which is something we have not seen that much of. So I think, what we're talking about here is distinguishing between inflation expectations and growth expectations, CPI
Totally
and
agree. I think there's way too much emphasis now on inflation.
And there's a lot of emphasis on break-evens and inflation expectations. And I think you're right to focus on real yields, on what growth is really going to look like, especially in an election year and what's going next.
Well, we may have a run rate here under 2% real GDP growth. Atlanta GDP now there. And on the jobs market, I'm sorry, Anna Wong with us later.
Yeah.
Anna Wong's work on birth death is brilliant. She's saying look for revisions lower.
Anna Wong is looking for a 25 bip cut by the Fed for every single quarter all the way out to 2026. I don't even know where her terminal rate is, but I'd love to ask her. I can't wait till she's on.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages, always from IBKR. IBKR Financial Advisors switched to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global tracking and turnkey custody solutions, no ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. This at ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa Mateo, what do you have?
All right, we're starting with the New York Times. I really need John Tucker for this one. Sources saying Governor Kathy Hochul pushing to delay congestion pricing. Now, it's slated to start June 30th. Hochul, though, thinks that congestion pricing is good for the environmental policy, but here's her concern, is that the timing was less than ideal because it's going to hurt the city's economy, which is still recovering from the pandemic. She wants to replace it with another revenue stream. She's considering proposing this tax on New York City businesses. That would need approval, though, from the New York State legislature.
I was thunderstruck today driving in. The Bentley's in the garage, so I had to come in. I'm going down Lexington Avenue, which I never go down. The number of stores, businesses, whatever you want to call it, boarded up, that's nuts.
Still. Well, they have a shortfall the city has a shortfall of $1 billion a year, Tom, so it's got to come from somewhere. If it's not going to come from drivers, it's got to come from businesses, I guess. But look, selfishly speaking, I am not a fan of this congestion tax at all. So.
Lisa, what do you think? My answer is it's loaded up on the FDR and the West Side Highway. I don't know.
I'm not a fan of the congestion. Granted, I'm coming from Jersey, so I'm one of those, there's a lot of lawsuits and everything still going that could delay it as well, but I'm not a fan of it.
We'll have team coverage with our surveillance congestion reporter, John Tucker. Look for that through the week. Next.
All right. We told you about Boeing Starliner launch today. Okay, so now SpaceX also getting a launch license. So it would be its fourth major test flight. It's from the FAA. They granted them the license. So SpaceX plans to launch Starship as early as tomorrow. That's from the company's Starbase facility in Texas. Bloomberg will carry that live too when it does happen. But it's kind of this next step in launching SpaceX's, future satellites, taking humans to the moon, possibly to Mars too on top of it. But this will be their fourth flight for the.
And Boeing is this morning just before 11 a.m.
Correct. Yes. 1052 is for Boeing. So a lot going on with space travel.
Yeah, it's just an interesting hybrid. We will see.
Blue Origin, Bezos, the whole smash.
That's the other one. Correct. Yeah.
We'll have to see. Next.
All right, we go from space travel to airline travel. All right, you have these elite flyers.
Probably riskier, but
they're going crazy
Charlie
for this.
Pellet.
You know, they have an exclusive airline status, okay? So it's like this semi-secret status.
Yeah, Damian's in it.
Damian's on it.
I'm trying to get in it.
He's trying.
I can't. I've spent many an hour on the phone with Delta trying to figure out how to get on Delta this or Delta that.
Yes.
And, you know, I get a lot of pushback everywhere. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, so it's United's invitation-only global services, Delta's 360, yes, and American's concierge key, okay? You get a lot of perks. Do you want to hear some of them?
Yeah.
Please.
You get customer service on speed dial.
You get customer service.
Yes, on speed
what
dial.
a perk.
Flight rebooking before you even know there's a problem. Lounge access, priority for upgrades, and listen to this one. Chauffeured drives in luxury cars to the gate if you're running late.
Virgin was doing that
yes.
years ago.
Is Penelope Cruz going to be there to hold our hand as we
I don't know. I know you would like that, though.
My basic take is it's out of control. I did a fancy private trip. The lounge was so packed, I had to stand at the bar going out, and coming back, I had to do the exact same thing. There were no seats in the lounge. The whole thing's, they got to blow it up and start all
Well,
over.
it's so secretive because
What do you think,
people
Damian?
are asking how much it's going to cost.
I fired my
my
present airline. I'm not going to say what it is.
And, you know, there are these new
somebody.
airlines that are popping up. I forget the name of it, but it flies out of Westchester. They only fly to a few designated locations, and apparently it's like flying private. And you go in through a part of the airport, not the public part with all the mishigas. You go in through this little private entrance, and it's supposed to be really nice.
Okay,
But
next,
you
what do you got?
got to spend a lot. You got to spend.
Yeah, you gotta spend a lot of
online
more.
forums are saying you got to
That's
spend
what
like
they
$50,000 plus. You know, a year in flights. All right, the last one we're going to talk about is Disney. So they could be set to invest billions of dollars into its Florida theme parks if this new development agreement is approved for today. We all know about the back and forth taking place between Disney, Governor Ron DeSantis' appointees. They've agreed to end that legal fight, right? But today, 5 DeSantis appointed as supervisors, they're going to oversee the Disney World who oversee that Disney World district. They're going to vote today. So we'll see. The results could happen, and if it does, $17 billion investment into its Florida parks. It could open the door to another theme park at Walt Disney, 2 more minor parks like water parks, raise the number of hotel rooms on its property.
So it's like, I'm confused. Is it a new Disney World, a bolt-on Disney World?
It's kind of giving it a boost. They want to boost up. Remember, Paul's always talking about this, how, we talk about the streaming, but he's like, it's all about the theme parks.
Do you do this, Damian?
Lisa, Tom loves Disney World.
I've never been.
He goes all
I
night.
went there
Come
to give a speech.
You stay at the Caribbean Beach Resort or is it
never been.
Animal Kingdom Lodge? Come on, tell us the truth. You know he's always there.
There's alligators. I'm not going down there. I mean, Anaheim I'll go to. Do the little teacups But essentially they want to make Disney World bigger.
They want to make it bigger. This is specifically for the Florida theme park. Okay. So they're going to increase even retail space. Restaurants increase that by 20%. But here's the thing: Disney does have to donate up to 100 of its acres for infrastructure projects controlled by that district. So that's kind of what they're getting up to.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The newspapers this morning. Damian Sassower in for Paul. Watched the movie last night. It was thrown at me at home, and they said, "Shut up and watch it."
Okay.
It's a Carlisle Hotel movie about Bobby Short.
Okay.
In what New York used to be, and it's amazing how it's changed. There's a beautiful quote from Fran Lebowitz in it about how the biggest problem in New York now is there's just so many people.
What New York? What year was the movie? Like what,
the 40s, the 50s, 60s. Way back, like a generation ago. We're going to feature today a guy who owns a high ground on this. His name is Steve Terrell. He saved Rod Stewart's career. He produced one of Rod Stewart's hugely successful albums 15, 20 years ago. This is the guy that did Hooked on a Feeling for B.J. Thomas. And I can tell you that when that song broke, it was like completely different. Oh yeah, by the way, he's got massive chops himself. Steve Terrell, when he's at the Carlisle. Good morning from Steve Terrell, New York City.
Let's have some fun. it once, and when you're dead, you're done. So let the good times roll. I said let the good times roll. I don't care if you're young or old. You ought to get together and let the good times roll.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Surveillance. Mr. Sweeney on assignment in Nashville with Alex Steele. They'll be with you in the 10 o'clock hour. We win. We have Damian Sassower with us after an eventful hour previous. Coming up in moments, Richard Clarida, the former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve System. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, 2 days before the jobs report. Brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Cohn Resnick can help you improve business resilience through a comprehensive risk management solution. Visit CohnResnick.com. Can't say enough about YouTube. Thank you for the support out there. It's a digital thing. We're all amazed by it, and it just builds and builds. Thank you so much for a very successful May. Looking forward to it on your commute. Your commute on Apple CarPlay, thank you. It's Nick Bloom out at Stanford with the idea we have longer commutes coming up. Thank you to the Wall Street Journal for that. And that's all there's. Damian, one quick comment here before we get to the chairman. What do you see this morning?
You know, I've seen central bank divergence. And look, again, I'm focused on Canada. I'm focused on the ECB. I'm taking off the back of what we've seen in Sweden and Switzerland. Just how much can these central banks cut rates in the face of a Fed on hold?
A Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Futures advancing. Signs of a cooling U.S. labor market fuel those higher odds of Federal Reserve interest rate cuts beginning as soon as November. Today, we're going to get a read on private payroll figures in about 15 minutes from now. And then we have the latest report on the U.S. services sector later this morning. Over to futures. We'll check in there. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, S&P futures up 0.3%, Dow futures up 0.2%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.77%, little change. The 10-year yield at 4.32%, and that has changed. Shares of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise higher, up 14%. The company sets for its biggest gain since 2016, and this is after revenue beat estimates thanks to a big jump in AI server sales. We have Intel up nearly 1%. It's agreed to sell a stake in a venture that controls a plant in Ireland to Apollo Global Management for $11 billion. And this headline just coming in, Alphabet has named a new CFO. Anat Ashkenazi has joined in from Eli Lilly. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Okay, we're going to go wonk on you now as we go to Richard Clarida, who changed Columbia Economics forever now at PIMCO, and we're thrilled the vice chairman could join us this morning. What an honor to have Michael Spencer, the laureate, and Richard Portis of London Business School talking about John Hicks. And long ago, there was a thing that was invented called the Hicks-Hansen model, which now we call the ISLM model. And the bottom line is the financial media completely focuses on financial LM dynamics, money, this, the interest rate, what's inflation can do. Oh, yeah, there's an IS curve, which has to have the real economy on it. Rich Clarida, is this Fed completely riveted to inflation, or can they perchance look at the American labor economy?
If you'd asked me that question, which I think you did 2 years ago, I'd say they're focused on inflation because it was too damn high. Fast forward to today, they're saying, and I believe that they do see the risk is two-sided. I think if we did see a sharp slowing in the labor market, they would respond because inflation is now close enough to target. They can afford to be flexible. 2 years ago, when inflation was 6-7%, no.
With the fancy PhDs, all from Columbia at the Eccles Building, when you quote unquote focus on labor, by definition, you're ex post. You have to wait for the labor economy to break. You can't anticipate it in a given central bank.
That's a very fundamental question because ideally central bankers, including on my own research with Gertler and Galley, in a perfect world you would anticipate. If you saw the labor market slowing, you try to get ahead. That's forward-looking monetary policy. As I learned in practice, however, the economy is always changing, and what was a good model 5 years ago may not be a good model now. So there's a real element of risk management as well. But I will tell you, I get a good example of that, Tom. During my time there, the models were saying, you guys are got to keep hiking rates because the unemployment rate's at 4.2%, and our models say inflation's coming. And Jay Powell and I, the committee, didn't see inflation. So we didn't hike rates in 2019. In fact, we cut a little bit so the economy could keep going. So there's risk on both sides, and I think good monetary policy needs to be nimble and assess that.
Central bank inflation targeting. Richard, this is something that, we felt, at least in emerging markets, that central banks had found religion. And here we are, and we're seeing central banks cutting in the face of a Fed on hold. And my question for you is, how long can that last?
This divergence. Certainly, I think there was some talk at the beginning of the year other countries would not even begin to cut until the Fed did. I never believed that. And I see we have already seen Sweden. We've seen Switzerland. We're almost certainly going to see Madame Lagarde and the ECB tomorrow. So I think certainly central banks can get those rate cuts started. And I think they could proceed much further than the Fed if their inflation data supports that decision. I think the challenge right now in Europe and the UK is the inflation data at best is moving sideways, and some measures is moving up. So that may limit the number of cuts they get in this year, not because they're focused on the Fed, but because inflation is not cooperating.
I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, look, inflation is not cooperating right now with the ECB, and Madame Lagarde this is an interesting experiment, Tom. I mean, can the ECB, I mean, it's 25 bips. What are they going to cut the depot rate to 4.75? Is that really going to juice growth in the Eurozone? I mean, do you think that's enough? Do you think they're going to have to continue to go more, or can they cut, pause, and wait and see what the Fed does?
My guess now is that they will pause, in the sense I don't see them moving at the meeting after the June meeting based upon the data now. In fact, maybe just to venture, there could be a little bit of seller's remorse, because they really signals this rate cut beginning in March, and I think they're going to get it in, and I think it makes sense to get it in. But I would not extrapolate from this that it's going to be every meeting. I really do think, and I saw a wonderful speech that Madame Lagarde gave at the ECB Watchers, where I also spoke in March. It was one of her best speeches, and the message I got from that is she is very data dependent, and if the data doesn't cooperate, I think that's going to be a factor.
In her Jackson Hole speech, which we covered, was the same idea as, okay, we're data dependent, but let's have a longer vision. Richard Clarida, I have to have a nerd book of the summer, and it's Adam Posen's fault. We'll blame him, out of the Peterson Institute. Maurice Obstfeld and Doug Irwin talking about trade, talking about what's out there. And all of this, and we're going to get Brad Setzer in here, but it's the idea of deglobalization. The Fed's got to worry about the rest of the world as well. Do they work within regional trading blocks now, or do we still have a vibrant trade economy that can be part of our growth?
Well, obviously, globalization, I think it's clear, has peaked. And so the real question for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is, what does onshoring, friendshoring, supply chain rethink, how does that translate? But I will say it's very relevant, Tom, to monetary policy, because in the 30 years before the pandemic, globalization made the Fed's job easier because it put downward price pressure on goods and in labor markets. And if it reverses, that means at the margin, the Fed's job is harder.
Right now, and this goes to the meeting next week, you've got a partition of domestic final sales, which are actually pretty good. But I'm sorry, you bolt on a few other statistics, including trade, and it's a sub 2% economy. Which is it?
My own sense is that we're heading down to around a 2% economy, with a risk that we could overshoot in the other direction. I think it's too soon to tell, but some of the data, including the Bloomberg Surprise Index, it has moved into negative territory. We saw Atlanta Fed mark down from 4 to 1.8 in the last couple of weeks. So bears watching.
Rich, we talk about data dependence here in the U.S., and we have two big data points coming out. We have the ISM services coming out tomorrow, and then followed by payrolls. But I think it's those subcomponents. So I'm asking you, what are you really looking at within the data? Are you looking at prices paid, new orders in the ISM data? Are you looking at, labor force size, average hourly earnings? I mean, what are you most focused on over the next couple of days?
At some level, the flip answer would be all the above. Certainly when you're at the Fed, you are looking at everything. But I would say that if I had to prioritize, I'm focused more on the cost side of the economy right now, in the sense that everyone agrees that the labor market needs to adjust to be consistent with the inflation mandate. And I would say that the numbers there are encouraging. We've seen a big deceleration in wage inflation. That may create some political problems for the incumbent, but from the Fed's point of view, it's moving wage inflation in the direction of consistent with price stability, unlike, for example, what we're seeing in the Eurozone and the UK. So I think labor market and the cost side of the economy is what I'd be focused on. I think the demand side will take care of itself.
I'm out of time. Can you come back?
Of course.
There's a Fed Day next week. If we can get you on for Fed Day, great. Richard Clarida, thank you so much. The former vice chairman of the Fed. I can't say enough about what he did to rebuild Columbia Economics a number of years ago. He's at a small shop where they play golf, PIMCO.
Small.
Out
West
on
Coast.
the West Coast.
West Coast golf.
South of Los Angeles, where the Dodgers lost 1-0 to the Pirates last night. It was like a trifecta.
Celtics in the finals.
The Celtics in the finals. The gentleman from Groton tells us that. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. President Biden has signed a series of executive actions to curb the number of asylum seekers at the U.S. southern border. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Under the executive actions, if the number of migrants who reached the southern border hit 2,500 over 7 consecutive days, the president has the authority to shut down border entry. But President Biden says that does not apply to those seeking asylum through legal ports of entry.
But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States.
Well, because the numbers are already so high, the rule is in effect and migrants are being turned away. Republicans call the order too little, too late. Progressives call the move draconian. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Indian Prime Minister Modi is gearing up for coalition talks after his ruling party lost its majority in parliament. It forces him to rely on allies to form a government. An AT&T outage affected millions of customers from coast to coast. The company saying everything is now working again and customers can make calls to other networks. AT&T, though, is not saying what caused the trouble. The FCC is looking into it. There are questions about what fell from the sky recently over North Carolina. It is the latest case of identified falling objects that appear to have come from outer space. Mike Wooten is a house owner and says a piece of space junk apparently hit his home.
We heard a thump on the roof right above me, and I came outside to see what might have hit. I looked out in the yard and saw this piece laying in the yard.
Meanwhile, for the third time in roughly a month, Boeing will try to launch its long-delayed space taxi this morning with the vehicle's first human crew for NASA following weeks of delays. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
YouTube live chat, just brilliant. And on the the consumption thing, Lisa, people saying you can't even find a parking spot at Home Depot or Walmart. What's a parking spot like?
Yeah, parking's great. It's not even just a parking, but it's like people are double parked. Like it's just a crazy
It's insane.
mess.
I've heard it's like no fun.
And then construction everywhere on top of it, and then you got the bike riders going. It's a mess.
And there's other things like the delivery guys and all that as well. Is it nuts? Is the golf club, parking terrible?
I'm still trying to get over Michael Barr talking about UFOs and Lisa talking about MDMA, ticker cyclical.
We do it all here.
I mean, MDMA, really? Psychedelics?
Yeah, the UFOs don't have to pay a congestion tax.
That too.
We'll have to see on that. Futures, to get to the markets, futures up 16. Dow futures up 85. I haven't even looked out where we are in futures on record high, but I'm sorry, we got to be getting back there.
Yeah,
NASDAQ up 0.6% as well. So it's important this morning. The real yield, wow, 2.00%. A 199 10-year real yield will be a big deal. From New York City, stay with us on YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after the decline in U.S. job openings boosted bets on Fed rate cuts this year. Speaking of which, we have some more economic data on the labor market coming in. Private payrolls for May, this is according to figures from ADP. The survey was for 175,000, came in lower at 152,000 last month. And this is after a much downward revision to that prior month. Next up, we have ISM Services Index. That comes out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. So we have the reaction. We have NASDAQ futures still up 0.5%, Dow futures up 0.2%, S&P futures up 0.3%. We go to the 2-year yield, 4.76%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.32%, and that is little changed as well. I want to point out shares of Dollar Tree, they're lower, down more than 2%. The company says it's looking into a possible sale or spin-off of its Family Dollar business. And then eBay says it's dropping American Express cards as a payment option because of unacceptably high fees. American Express says it's disappointed with that decision. eBay and Amex both down about 0.2%. And sources say Elliott Management rebuilt a more than $2 billion stake in SoftBank. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Damian and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. On ADP, we get a little bit of a lift in equities. VIX 12.93, but yields come in nicely. And I'm sorry, Damian, I've got a lower tepid ADP. I don't put much weight in it, but nevertheless, the vector is less job formation with a slight less job formation revision as well. This is important before claims and for the jobs report on Friday.
Absolutely, and it's nice to see that the equities are bouncing on the news because, sometimes bad news is not necessarily good news for the U.S. equity market.
Yeah, I don't get bad news, good news. This has all become the vogue now. Yeah. Bramo's all over it.
I know.
I mean, Bramo,
Bad news is bad news, bad news
Lisa
is good
Mateo
news.
is never bad news, good news. It's always good news.
The only bad news is I have to pay for a bat mitzvah this weekend for my youngest daughter, so it's going to be
really
playlist I have to come up with.
Mazel.
Yeah, no, it's a good mazel. It's a mazel type of thing. I don't even know this guy. I mean, this is my third child. I don't even know who she. I have to say speech. I don't even know.
At the third child, you just give up, right? What's the biggest difference between this wonderful service of the Jewish religion between the oldest first child and the third offspring?
If I said what I'm really thinking right now, I would be walked out of the building. So I'm not going to say it. But I can say she's lovely, at least on paper. And, if only I knew who she was.
She's wearing Dior. Joining us now, not wearing Dior in London, is Leslie Vinjamuri. I'm dying to talk to her, to bring over what we just saw in India over to Biden-Trump November of this year. Leslie, I am sobered over, and I understand there's a caste system in America, in India, and there isn't a caste system in America, but there really is. But the poor of India, boy, did they speak in this election.
Yeah, it's a very surprising result. We still have Modi, bound to run the country for a third term, which is a very significant result. But yes, not what people expected. And by all counts, it's really what we see in the U.S. too. People voting on the basis of how they on the daily life, economics, prices of food, job opportunities. India has a very large youth population, high levels of unemployment amongst young people, and problems when it comes to, those level of jobs, education, and health. And so that is a signal. And we will see an India in which Modi has to govern slightly differently than the last several years.
Leslie, you staggered through Wesleyan before you did LSE, and you learned humility about polling. Does Leslie Vinjamuri trust the polling in America?
The polling is fine for what it is, but don't draw a direct line from polling to whether you or I or our children or our neighbors or our friends get up and vote. And we all know that this, more than anything else, is an election that is about, are they enthusiastic? Are they passionate enough to either vote for or, in effect, vote against Biden and Trump? Will they get out of bed? Will they vote? And especially, will those voters that matter in those states that matter vote? So sure, the polling's, it's interesting. Not a lot more than that at this stage, this many months out, and it doesn't tell us what we need to know, which is how inspired, how passionate are people. So the things I would look at is young voters in swing states. Are they going to be mobilized to, in effect, vote against Biden because of the war in Gaza? Do they care about climate change? Therefore, they'll turn up for President Biden. how much are voters in the manufacturing sector still feeling the pressure on a daily basis of inflation? That would drive them to, be enthusiastic to vote for Donald Trump, not for any rational reason, but as a vote against Biden. So there's lots of uncertainty here. We kind of know what matters, but no, the polling doesn't really, it gives us something to talk about for many, many months. We have a long way to go.
Well, yeah, Leslie, I mean, I'd love to ask you about these elections in India, South Africa, and Mexico, but I mean, you went to Israel, so let's just go there. Israel Hezbollah rhetoric is heating up. Benny Gantz saying Israel will return residents to the north by step one, either through a deal or escalation. I mean, we've got wildfires in the north due to Hezbollah drone and rocket attacks. More than 60,000 Israelis remain displaced. Talk to us about what comes next in Israel.
Yeah, there is not a clear path forward in this war. We're seeing Netanyahu doubling down on the war effort in Rafah, to the great backlash from much of the rest of the world. We're seeing more pressure on President Biden and others to really try and get Israel to exercise restraint, but not a lot of that happening right now. We have this wild card of the International Criminal Court that's likely to confirm an arrest warrant on the Israeli prime minister, which again, from all counts, is actually leading many Israelis to gather around, who their prime minister's not been very popular, but this is actually working against that. So all sorts of wild cards, but it's at the moment, there is no clear sense that a deal is going to be delivered. That the war is going to result in what everybody thinks needs to happen, which is a two-state solution. And there is that concern about what's going to happen between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon.
Leslie, I mean, I may not think this way, you may not think this way, but from where I sit, most of America feels that a vote for the Republican Party for Donald Trump is a vote for Israel, and vice versa. A vote, for the Democratic Party is a vote against Israel. I mean, Is that something, is that real? Do you believe that? I mean, is that the way the U.S. Election is headed right now?
I mean, I don't think that young voters see that. They see a president in President Biden who's been very pro-Israel, and a party that's very divided. Certainly has a progressive wing that wants to move in a different direction when it comes to America's support of Israel. But that has not been, just in terms of America's military support of Israel, that's not at all been the case. So I think that the story is much more complicated in terms of whether the Democratic Party, if President Biden were reelected, will pull back some of that support. Very hard to say. I think in the medium term, in a longer lifespan, America's support of Israel is likely to diminish, but not in the near term, not in the.
Dr. Vinjamuri, thank you so much. Leslie Vinjamuri with us this morning. Greatly appreciate that. From London, straddling the Atlantic at Chatham House as well. Futures up 13, Dow futures up 58. Equities on the Sassower comment on bad news, good news is bad news is whatever news, have pulled in a little bit off the ADP report. Maybe they're like, tepid jobs, so they pull in a little bit. But in the bond market, it's tangible. There's no other way to put it. Yields were in lower. They're now churning is where I would put it. And the
dollars rallying.
Tips, we got to 2.00 and now 2.02. So there's some shifts. There's shifts going on here as well. I want to take this off script here for 30 seconds, Damian. I'm sorry, euro yen just won't give it up. I guess I got stronger yen, I got stronger euro, but I got a 170 euro yen. I mean, it's still at this tipping point.
Well, I go back to what Greg's saying. You take what this market gives you, and if the market, I mean, you can put on cheap tail hedges. You don't pay a lot of money to bet for the yen to go up from here, right? So if you're looking for sort of a tail hedge, getting long yen versus the dollar inexpensively through options is something that probably makes sense to a lot of people.
On your commute, Android, and look for Apple CarPlay as well. Commute's getting longer in America, and we're glad that you let us be a part of it on Apple CarPlay, safer, better on YouTube. Search Bloomberg Podcasts, subscribe Bloomberg Podcasts. We're building that out in all sorts of different ways. Do you know you get Carol Masser on YouTube?
I love Carol Masser, of course.
You could do.
I
Tim
just
and
logged
Carol.
her out of LinkedIn on the terminal here.
Tim and Carol. You get Nathan and Kara Moscow. It's like everything's there. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Good morning from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after more signs of a cooling labor market. U.S. companies, they added fewer jobs than forecast in May. ADP data says private payrolls increased 152,000 last month. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, 93 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 13 points. Dow futures up 0.1% at 69 points. The two-year yield 4.78%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.33%, and that is little changed. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher at $2,336 an ounce. Brent crude $77 a barrel. WTI crude at $73 a barrel. This morning, psychedelic stocks are falling. The drug MDMA had failed to get that backing from U.S. regulatory advisors to treat PTSD. So a few examples: Mind Medicine down 8%. We have Compass Pathways down 13%. Then we move over to personal styling company Stitch Fix, up 16%. Love them. Posted a third quarter loss that was a little bit smaller than expected. And then in other news, BlackRock, Citadel, others backing an upstart Texas stock market to rival the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. TXSE, that'll be based in Dallas, is raised $120 million, and it plans to register with the SEC. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
That's really interesting. We're going to have to do a little more on that in the coming days and weeks. Futures up 13. Our economic indicators at 8:15. ADP report a little light. Lots of indicators at 10 a.m. this morning and on to jobs report on Friday. Always brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. All of what we do, and as a CFA, I can speak to this, we're guilty of this, is basic physics envy, and particularly that of Newtonian mechanics from the 19th century. And one of the great, great words out there, overdone, drives me to gray hair, is the word momentum, which is basically that the movement of the particle, think the market, is somehow equivalent to the forces involved across a change in time. Liz Ann Saunders almost stood up and walked out of the studio and joins us now from Charles Schwab. We were talking before, and you and I are on the same page on this. Enough for the math baloney. What in God's name is momentum?
Well, in simple terms, it just means that stocks that have been working continue to work. But I think when people hear that word, they often have preconceived notions of what are momentum stocks, and it's often just tech and some of the high flyers. But as we've seen this year, the momentum is in areas like utilities. We wouldn't classically think of them as momentum stocks. We think of them as classically defensive stocks. Right. But that's just happens to be where the momentum is.
But this goes back then to the arch issue you fought against for a few years, and that is story stocks. Are utilities now a story stock because of AI and beyond conventional analysis?
It's not just AI, but it's the power story. It's the power associated with AI, but it's also the build out globally of the power grid. So I think there are some fundamentals, but that's been the story behind utilities.
Liz Ann Saunders, you have been on the money in terms of highlighting the bifurcations in financial markets, big versus small, poor haves versus have-nots, low income versus high income consumers. Talk to us about these bifurcations, and if we are indeed in a trend-following, momentum-driven economy or market, shall I say, can we expect this to continue?
Well, I actually think we're seeing more breakdown under the surface of the indexes that may, in part, reflect some of these bifurcations and the fact that there are so many cross currents in terms of the data. You've got pretty significant divergence happening within the market, even within segments like the Magnificent Seven. And I think that's likely to continue. The NASDAQ is up about 11% year to date, has had no more than a 7% max drawdown this year, but the average member within the NASDAQ has had a 36% drawdown. It's less extreme for the S&P, it's 14%, but that's still correction level decline. So there's a lot more churn and rotation going on under the surface. And I think that is what reflects all of these cross currents and these bifurcations, which you wouldn't pick up if you stopped your analysis at the index level.
So, Lizanne, is that what you mean in your latest note when you said that the market has halitosis, or were you just sitting next to someone on the train into the city today who maybe didn't brush their teeth?
The breadth is not great. It's not horrific. It's still about 2/3 of the S&P is in an uptrend. But you've had a big decline, obviously, in percentage of stocks at the sector level, at the index level, trading above 50-day moving averages from closer to 100% earlier in the year, now down into the kind of 50% zone. But breadth has been worse in the past. So I think there's some halitosis, but it's not extreme.
We didn't break 2% in the 10-year real yield. We got down to 2.0013. What are the ramifications to stocks if yields break down through various and sundry supports?
Well, this has been an interesting recent period where we've had this move back down in the 10-year yield from 4.7 and concerns at that time that we were heading back up towards
4.32%.
Now 4.32%. You would think that would have accrued to the benefit of smaller cap stocks because there's been that much tighter inverse relationship between small caps and moves in the yield than in the case with large caps. But something has changed very recently, and I think what may be the calculus at this point is the weaker economic profile bringing yields down.
Sub 2% GDP. I mean, it's like an elephant in the room.
And what does that mean for profits?
And Lizanne, I think the big theme, if I had to put a theme on today, it's been concentration risk, right? And you mentioned that in your last note too. I mean, 24%. I mean, what, 4 stocks? I mean, talk to us a little bit about what your clients are telling you about concentration risk.
That's
and how
almost
you're
an all-time high. The all-time high was in what I think of as a great year, 1964, my birth year. And
she was 5 years old.
I was not 5 years old in 1964.
Oh my God. She was
I was born in
to
1964, Tom.
Album.
Please do not age me. Oh, by the way, speaking of birth, I just want to say happy birthday to my dad, Ralph Saunders, who is 94 today.
Oh, wow.
Happy
birthday, Ralph.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Is he in the market? That's always
does he like rate sensitive stocks?
No, my parents, it's mostly treasury bills these
They're
days.
loving 5%.
God, sounds familiar.
He's in the Paul Sweeney camp.
Exactly.
Listen, I got to ask you the huge question, which Schwab is so able at. Forget about all the mumbo jumbo, you, Kathy Jones, and the rest. What are people actually doing with their money right now?
We're in another circumstance these days that is not terribly different from when we're in highly volatile periods, is we find that our investors that have what we call an advised approach. So they've got a long-term plan. They might be working with a financial consultant or an advisor. It's very methodical and tied to their time horizon and need for income. So that strategic asset allocation plan, they're much calmer through periods
buying
of uncertainty.
IG credit on the dip. That's basically what that means to me, Tom. I mean, every advisor's telling them, you're never going to see yields like this, 5% U.S. yields. I mean, you've got to wave it in here. Take what the market gives you.
How is
every
our
financial
behavior,
advisor.
to the momentum thing that we started with, how has our behavior changed? Because we are without correction or out 18% bear market. To me, there's a germane, tangible change in behavior of people, because 3% is the new correction.
You know what I found, and I'll give you an anecdote. I did a fairly large client event in Westport, Connecticut last night, and there's always very robust Q&A. Not to be ageist, because, I'm old, but the questions from the older-leaning part of the audience were much more concerning, negative, asking about uncertainty, asking about inflation, the debt and deficit, and election concerns.
In the youth of America?
The young folks the questions were much more opportunistic.
Yeah.
Should I get in? I even got one. Should I get in on the meme stock craze? One older gentleman started to ask a question, and he kept saying Kitty Hawk. And I'm thinking, oh no, he's going back in history, and I'm going to have to remember. And of course, he meant Roaring Kitty, but he said Kitty Hawk. And I said,
that's so
think
funny.
you might be talking about Roaring Kitty. He said, oh yeah, not Kitty Hawk.
Well, we call it Hello Kitty here, which gets us so far. We got to go, but Lizanne, to this point, I would point out what's really important to the older crew in Westport for Charles Schwab is they have the Hinckley picnic boats, and the kids just want to catch up.
Well, maybe via Barton and Gray, but yeah, they're on them.
Isn't the statistics on 401ks are amazing? I mean, people that are in the game have participated in this.
And I think for a lot of investors, I think we've had this conversation before, this whole notion that the $6 trillion sitting in money market funds is imminently ripe to come into the equity market. I think a lot of that is really sticky money for investors that finally have a yield on fixed income and they don't have to go out the risk spectrum.
Paul emails in from Nashville, says, say hi to Liz Ann Saunders. Paul Sweeney just wants to know one thing. Are you going to go see the Stones?
Probably, yes.
You didn't
I've seen them many times. My first Stones concert was 1981, Philadelphia, at the huge stadium, RFK or JFK.
Tell me you didn't go to Taylor Swift in Paris.
No, I appreciate her talent very much. It's not my kind of music.
Yeah.
You know.
You're a rocker.
I'm a rock chick.
I mean,
I'm a rock chick.
I mean, she was 5 years old, folks, listening to the first Led Zeppelin album going, OMG. Liz Ann Saunders. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. With Charles Schwab, really important conversation there in momentum. I don't want to underplay that. That was key. With our news, with futures up 17 in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Damian, Lisa. Testimony continues today in the Hunter Biden gun case. Jurors have heard close to an hour of excerpts from Hunter Biden's memoir read in his own voice.
Paul Sweeney.
Why are we...
As the audiobook played in court, First Lady Jill Biden and Hunter's sister, Ashley, were seen fighting off tears. Beau Biden's widow is expected to tell jurors how she found Hunter's gun and why she was so concerned. The defense has suggested he was not using drugs when he bought the revolver. The first debate is in the books ahead of next month's UK election, but Prime Minister Rishi Sunak may have failed to make a dent in Labour leader Keir Starmer's huge polling lead. Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden has more from London.
YouGov polling showed that marginally the Prime Minister came out on top. In terms of those numbers, whose message dominated, we did do a tally, actually. 56 times was the word tax mentioned. 13 times the Prime Minister said that Labour would raise the average Brit's taxes by £2,000. Only 12 times did the opposition leader Keir Starmer manage to say that people wanted a change after 14 years of Conservative rule. So the message dominating was Sunak reaching for this tried and tested Tory tactic of painting Labour as tax raisers.
Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden in London. An Italian court has reconvicted Amanda Knox of slander, quashing her hope of removing a legal stain against her that has persisted long after exoneration in the brutal 2007 murder of her British roommate. The court found that Knox had wrongly accused an innocent man of the killing the owner of the bar where she worked part-time. But she will not serve any more jail time, given the 3-year sentence counts as time already served. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Bloomberg Business and Sports. Paul Sweeney out front in this, as well as Michael Barr. Here is the headline. This from the Wall Street Journal. The National Basketball Association nears a $76 billion deal with 3 entities, NBC, ESPN, Disney, and Amazon as well. And they're beginning to parse this out. And to me, Damian Sassower, the key deal of $76 billion, it's an 11-year transaction.
That's right.
They box out TNT and the rest.
Well, it sounds like Disney's still paying the most of that. Of the 3, they want the playoffs, they want the finals, but Amazon's paying $1.8 billion a year to air regular season and playoff games. So this is going to be, and the NBA in-season tournament, by the way, which a lot of people tune into. So this is pretty big news. It's a lot of money.
I would like to know what happens to Charles and Ernie
I'm
and
not worried
Shaq
about Charles.
and
Charles is
Yeah,
going.
but that was a unit, that TNT show.
It was hugely popular. I mean, plain and simple.
I mean, Charles is coming. Charles is going to go to wherever he is the best. I mean, he will. And I think his contract is probably loose enough where he can go wherever he, quite frankly, he likes.
Well, they're going to have to see, but it's finally here.
King
and again,
Charles.
it says, do you guys, well, we're going to have to run here. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have futures edging higher. Treasury yields gaining after its largest two-day drop this year. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, 115 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, 18 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 105 points. The two-year yield at 4.76%. That is little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.31%, and that is actually down 1 basis point. Companies making news. That's Boeing. It's trying to launch its long-delayed space taxi today with its first human crew for NASA. Starliner expected to launch 10:52
Joe
a.m.
Weisenthal is supposed to fly.
There you go, from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Bloomberg will carry it all live. Shares down about 0.3%. And the Amazon Labor Union moving toward an affiliation with the Teamsters. If this alliance is formed, it could put more pressure on Amazon to negotiate with workers at a warehouse in New York City. We have Amazon up nearly 0.5%. And you heard Tom and Damian talking about it. The NBA nearing a $76 billion TV deal over the 11 years. Wall Street Journal says it's closing in on agreements with NBC, ESPN, and Amazon. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Damian and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Damian, you know, I look at YouTube, and these people are like leading real lives under like the robotness that we lead. Good morning. On the Jewel of the Seas, this guy's floating in the Arctic Circle Ocean, southbound.
Really?
He's moving where it's warmer. And he's on the Royal Caribbean boat, Jewel of the Seas, which is like 47 stories tall.
Got one of those
doing
water
like
slides,
the Norway, Greenland, Reykjavik, Iceland thing.
I mean, it's a nice cruise.
It's a reach like Odd Lots has.
You know, I've never been on a cruise. I've never
been on a cruise. Tracy, you been on a cruise?
When I was 10, I think it was not my favorite vacation.
But I feel like Tracy could become a cruise person. It's not completely like, if I'm just being honest, if like Tracy told me that she was going to get really
Joe,
into
I swear to God, if you say I should go on one of those Disney cruises,
Not Disney,
that's going to be the
but, like,
meanest thing you ever
Would
said
you
to me.
Would you bring the dog?
Oh, I would love to bring the dog.
I could see Tracy being like a river, an inland
There's no
river
way.
cruise.
Joining us now, Odd Lots, and it's just hugely successful podcast with a really interesting audience. Who's your audience? Who's the audience of Odd Lots? Joe Weisenthal, Tracy Allen.
I would say it's business and finance professionals and people who are not in those fields but interested in conversations that are sort of clear enough and sophisticated that they can be invited.
This is here right now, and it's solar power, and as a fossil, I think of solar power as broken things on your roof.
Yeah.
But the answer is it's booming, and all of a sudden wind isn't happening. And you look at this in a show. This is percolating for the summer of 2024. Joe, tell us about the interview you did on the failure of wind power.
Yeah, it was super interesting. So we had the CEO of Ørsted USA. Ørsted is, of course, the huge Danish company, but we talk, it's been around forever. And we know that like there's a lot riding on wind power, particularly in the Northeast, for decarbonization, particularly since we don't have a ton of like solar opportunities out here. 2023, pretty awful year for the industry. And it is really cliche alert, but like that perfect storm of like very specific supply chain constraints, plus all of renewables are so dependent on the financial environment, and so much is upfront
So the
cost.
rate change, Tracy, changed this?
The interest rates were a huge headache for, you think about a business that's basically all about capital investment and building these massive things. So immediately the maths changed very significantly, and that's why you saw a lot of canceled projects, a lot of write-downs. But the other thing that happened, and Tom, I know you like to talk about this, but we talk a lot about the failure of traditional macroeconomics to understand the way the world really works sometimes. One of the things that David Hardy was talking about with us was this idea that they were basically sending the demand signal to their suppliers, saying that we need more of these things. We need more ships. We need more of those giant, blades that go on the turbines. But because of the actual time scale involved in building these things, you don't get that immediate supply response. And I think this is something that, we were in Jackson Hole together last year, that central bankers are only just beginning to appreciate that sometimes the demand signal doesn't work the way you think it's going to in classical economics.
Damian, your grand banks you've got, the 48-foot. I mean, you named it not in my backyard. You got wind power up where you are?
You know, Tracy's talking about Jackson Hole and Davos and all these wonderful places that Gene
well,
and Joe
we
get
don't
to
live
go
like
to.
that.
And you know, all I want to talk about is Roaring Kitty. I want to talk about a good friend of the show, Luke Kawa, who was on Odds Lot just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
By the way, we're an hour out from the Bank of Canada, for those listening. Talk to us a little bit about meme stocks. What is going on there? And by the way, let's be clear, Odd Lots is for real financial professionals. So I'm just asking meme stocks because Luke Kawa was on. Yeah, let's hear about it.
We had a whole discussion with Luke. Luke was the perfect person to talk about this because he was one of the first people at Bloomberg who sort of took Wall Street bets seriously.
That's right.
And he wrote a cover story back when no one knew what that subreddit actually was. And it's kind of funny if you go back and read it now because he's trying to explain some of the terminology that is used in that particular forum. But of course, everyone knows it now. The interesting thing about the current meme stock rally is, despite all this activity from Roaring Kitty, it's kind of fizzled out relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Like we saw the big spike in GameStop. It's up a little bit yesterday off the back of the additional news, but it's not as nuts as before.
I had a nightmare.
Go on.
Joe Weisenthal moves back to Texas to drive forward the Dallas Stock Exchange. Did you see the news overnight?
The Texas Stock Exchange.
Texas Stock Exchange.
Right.
Is that what they're going to call it?
Yeah, the non-woke stock exchange where they don't have any of those requirements about like board diversity and stuff like that is what it's apparently going to be. I don't know.
The NWSE. The non-woke stock exchange.
I am extremely interested to see how this unfolds and extremely curious to, track the performance of companies for whom avoiding like the NYSE's minimal expectations requirements is like an important aspect of their business.
The interview you have to have on Odd Lots, obviously, is the first phone call there is to Michael Dell. So they have to convince Michael Dell to be on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange and also be on the Dallas-Fort Worth Stock Exchange.
I mean, what about BlackRock? What about convincing Larry Fink to let shares of BLK trade on the Texas Stock Exchange?
JP Morgan's in Plano, Texas. Do they
Maybe
need to
they
be
do
on
it
this?
down where, the Fort Worth Stockyard is a really fun place to visit if you've never been. One of my favorite places in the whole country.
They have the
big, where they
you
used
go
to
there and you
have all
see like the big they take the cattle out. I think
Yeah.
it's once per day on the weekends.
Yeah, and they have and it used to be, obviously a very thriving open outcry, basically cattle exchange. So maybe they can repropose that space for
Joe,
the
you're
Texas
expert on this. I mean, your grandfather was riding a trail up to Dodge City there years ago.
Detroit, Michigan.
The price of beef. I mean, what's the future of the cattle business? It's $29 a pound for a piece of beef.
Yes, Joe, what is the future of the cattle business?
I don't know what the future is, but there was that comment on the recent Costco earnings call that they see continued robust for Wagyu beef at Costco, and that this seems like another one of those things where it's like everyone is upset about high prices, and yet they are still going for the Wagyu at Costco, but Wagyu nonetheless. I think that says something.
We're arguing who gets a Gulfstream. Are you guys going to Jackson Hole this year? That was fun last year.
I think
we're hoping to. Are you going to go?
Yeah, I'm there.
Great.
We're booked. It's going to be.
I'm not.
The usual crew: John Farrow and Lisa Bramowitz, and we're going to do a lot of Fed-centric stuff.
So we'll go to the diner again.
We'll go to the diner and we'll see how
Wagyu
prices
beef.
compare to this year versus last year.
Well, they have a $6 gin and tonic, so we like.
So you have to go.
You have to go.
Well, didn't you have a good episode on Monday? You were talking about dynamic pricing strategies and algos and stuff.
Yes. So I have been wanting to do an episode on price pack architecture for a long time, and it so happened that the American Prospect came out with a edition of the magazine that was basically all about this. So we spoke with the editor, and we spoke with Lindsay Owens, an economist that he worked with, basically all about how smart companies are getting nowadays in extracting as much money as possible.
Whenever Joe Weisenthal's here, we have to play Texas. And what's so cool about Steve Tyrell and all the jazz he's done and all the miracle he did with Rod Stewart was he cut his teeth on the ultimate Texas single. When we were kids, B.J. Thomas showed up with Hooked on a Feeling. And Steve Tyrell produced that whole Texas rock and roll thing that came out of, L.A. and Nashville and New York ages ago. So we're featuring Steve. It's not like Light Sweet Crude doesn't play.
We're
Steve
playing this
Tyrell.
Saturday, People's Garden in Bushwick, Brooklyn. So come on down.
Okay. You got merch?
Not yet. We always blow our opportunities to make any money.
Steve Terrell's first rule, have the merch.
Have the merch, yeah.
Light Sweet Crude in Brooklyn this weekend. Good morning.
In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Mr. Sweeney on assignment, Nashville. He'll be with you in 59 minutes with Alex Steele in Nashville. Damian Sassower with a short straw today. Joining as well, Damian, the market list. Futures up 20, NASDAQ up 0.7%.
And real yields are just mired here at the 200 mark on the 10-year.
Didn't get a 1.99, but there we are.
Oh, there we are. So it's just going to be a crazy day here, Tom. We're looking forward to 9:45, Bank of Canada. Are they going to cut or not?
Esteemed guests right now with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Futures advancing after signs of weakness in the labor market from private payroll provider ADP. Its latest report on corporate job growth showed 152,000 new jobs added last month. That was fewer than forecast. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, S&P futures up 0.3%, Dow futures up 0.2%. The yield on the 2-year, 4.76%. That is little change. The 10-year yield at 4.32%, and that is little change. Shares of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise higher, up 15%. The company set for its biggest gain since 2016. Its revenue beat estimates thanks to that big jump in AI server sales. And this news, Alphabet has named a new CFO, Anat Ashkenazi. She was a former CFO, executive vice president at Eli Lilly, where she worked for more than 23 years. She begins her shift on July 31st. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Thanks so much. This is a joy. Right now, the number one word I use, folks, when I talk to cherubs about what we do every day, the single word is velocity. Mm-hmm. And our two guests that we have right now, frankly, like Damian Sassower, max out on velocity. Gina Martin-Adams is just outstanding on the equity markets with Bloomberg Intelligence. She's been brilliant on staying in this market amid the fears. And someone who has parsed the American economic landscape, and particularly our job economy, is Thomas Purcelli of PGIM, and we're thrilled they could join together. Two different remits here, but we're going to go with it this morning. Tom Purcelli, a jobs report on Friday, and we're going to speak to Gina Martin-Adams about if we finally get a crack in the jobs report. From where you are as an economist, is that good for stocks?
So let me first say that I don't think that this report will necessarily show that the labor backdrop has cracked, but I think that there are cracks. I don't think you need this report to sort of drive that point home, because I think there's a lot of other things going on beneath the surface outside of the payroll report that really do show
Is it good for stocks?
So I think what it means is that you're going to have a Fed teed up to cut rates this year. And I think in that context, as long as it's a gentle easing cycle, I think it could be really good for stocks.
Gina Martins, fold that in from your equity prism as well. You have to look at an economy, Atlanta GDP now sub 2%. Tom Purcelli, expert on wage growth. If we get this vaunted economic slowdown, I mean, does it have legs on it to propel stocks longer, further, higher?
Yeah, I think it depends on the degree of the slowdown, Tom. I hate to be a little wishy-washy, but if the cracks in the labor market are perceived as ultimately leading to a true recessionary experience in which the unemployment rate accelerates meaningfully and it creates a drawdown in Fed policy, it is not good for stocks.
Give me an unemployment rate, Gina Martin-Adams, where you say stocks get painful.
100 basis point rise in the unemployment rate.
5%? You need a 4.95?
Yeah, it's
Purcelli, is she on target?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Gina rightly highlights that there's a lot of nuance in this.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you my base case. My base case is for economic activity that's going to slow but not fall off a cliff. Economic activity that slows enough for the Fed to modestly adjust rates. And in that environment, I think risk can perform well. But sure, I mean, if we just want to talk about the extremes, yes, in the extreme scenario of things look really poor and the Fed is aggressively cutting, then no, I don't think, risk can perform well in that.
Tom, a month ago we were talking and you said this is a Fed that wants to cut. Well, what is it waiting for? I mean, we've got Canada, Sweden, Switzerland. I think people are talking about the ECB tomorrow. What's it going to take for the Fed to move?
I think what the Fed needs are a few more reports like the last PCE report. I think if you get that, I think that's probably enough to clear the deck for the Fed to feel comfortable to take back some of the aggressive tightening that they put in place. And what's interesting is, and I think we're now in a backdrop where the risks are more two-way for the Fed, so that even if you sort of have let's say a modestly worse PCE report, but it comes with labor that's those cracks that are showing more, I think that's also enough, right? So I think a lot of roads lead to the Fed easing.
So Gina, what sectors should we be invested in if indeed we see inflation starting to come up here? Is it going to be rate-sensitive sectors? I mean, utilities, real estate, where do we go?
Yeah, it depends upon, again, if the inflation is coming off because of demand concerns or if it's just a supply easing that drives the inflation deceleration,
Right.
because that's really meaningful for determining whether you're going to look at goods-based sectors or services-based sectors in the S&P 500. I think you have to dig beneath the headlines. So this is a big story for us right now, is even looking at the S&P 500 PE, as we've discussed multiple times, gives you completely false views on what's really going on in the index. Looking at the broad unemployment rate doesn't give you a huge indication of what's happening with the claims numbers. Looking at inflation in a vacuum and not understanding the difference between PPI and CPI right now completely misplaces your ultimate investment strategy. So I do think you have to dig beneath the headline data releases. What we're looking at on inflation right now is PPI. I don't care what CPI is doing, because as we've proven so far this year, we started this year thinking we're going to get 6 rate cuts. Now we're thinking we get none or maybe 1 or 2, and the equity market just keeps going higher. This is meaningless. What really matters is what's happening in the early stages of inflation, whether or not we're getting reinflation in PPI, and if that ultimately erodes margins for S&P 500 companies. That is a trigger point that we want to watch. So I think you just need to dig beneath these headline numbers.
If you're joining us, Gina Martin-Adams with us, Tom Perselli with us, he with PGIM, she with Bloomberg Intelligence. This is what our conversation is about worldwide. On YouTube, search for Bloomberg Podcast. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Damian, ask a smarter question than me, please.
Well, we have ISM services.
Wait, is that possible? Is that possible?
Oh, Damian's killing it.
Tom, how important is ISM services? And more importantly, as Gina points out, how important are these prices paid subcomponents of these ISM surveys? Do you pay attention to those?
Yeah, I mean, look, we pay attention to everything. I mean, I think you sort of have to.
To the markets, I guess, is the right question.
Yeah, exactly. Out of necessity, we have to. Look, I would say that when I look at, I think there's countless ways of sort of slicing up inflation, and I think Gina's quite right. I think beneath the surface is where all the interesting stuff is. And so here, I'll give you something interesting to consider, which is, again, the sentiment data have not been necessarily comporting with the hard data. I think that there are a couple of specific examples where soft data are comporting with hard data. It's not necessarily on the inflation front. So on the inflation front, I'll give you an interesting way of thinking about this. I think that you can look at inflation in staples terms, like core staples inflation and core discretionary inflation. And if it's true that everyone's running out and spending all of this money and they're keeping inflation sticky, then you would expect that discretionary inflation, core discretionary inflation, would be actually the thing that's being sticky. It's not.
Right.
The thing that's sticky is core staples inflation. I think that's a really important idea, because much of what's going on beneath the surface there is idiosyncratic that the Fed cannot control.
I mean, this is important. And you get to core, Gina Martin-Adams, what is the view forward here on core earnings and the revenues that drive it and the persistency of margin growth? My tape, Futures Up 23, is telling me the market's betting on margin persistence.
I think you're absolutely right, and this is a really critical component of the outlook for 2025 in particular. I think we're in this period of almost idyllic inflation conditions, where CPI is rising much faster than PPI, at least in terms of the equity market performance. That spread has been very, very positive. PPI has been stable, CPI has been stable. The risk is that that dynamic shifts later in 2024 and into 2025. How it shifts will be really consequential for margins, especially outside of tech. This is really important at this point in time because we're past peak tech earnings growth. We are now moving into an environment that is somewhat unknown for this cycle, and that is we're no longer going to get our upward momentum in earnings from tech. We've got to get it from somewhere
Damian,
else.
squeeze in one more question here, because I can't concentrate, because she's talking about the old Chicago song, In the Year 2025, and I just feel old when she mentions 2025. It's not fair. I can't concentrate.
Gina Martin-Adams, we're in a period of sticky inflation and rising rainfall. That means traditionally defensive, low beta sectors tend to outperform the broader S&P. What's the best way to position if I'm defensive?
Yeah, it is so difficult right now because you've got a lot of moving parts in the defensive sector. Healthcare has been a remarkable disappointment. Healthcare is supposed to be a defensive sector. We've got all these accounting changes which are creating major quality issues in healthcare, but I think that's coming to an end Consumer staples and healthcare have been sectors that have bubbled up in our sector rotation model. Utilities is also toward the top. The one sector that is not, that is traditionally a defensive sector, is real estate. That is still well at the bottom of our scorecard.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of other moving parts to consider. Financials is behaving somewhat defensively.
Yeah. Last word to Friday. We got Anna Wong next. Are we going to see revisions down in jobs? Are you looking for a number beneath the 180 statistic?
So no, actually, I think Friday could be a decent number. I think it could easily be 200,000. But
Really?
But here's the thing, and I think this is really interesting, Tom, and it'll take me 1 second to say this. The QCEW, no one ever pays attention to it. It came out a week or two ago. It basically is the thing that feeds into the benchmark revision from a payroll perspective. And what it actually shows is that last year, you could be looking at 50,000 less jobs per month on average per the revisions in the QCEW. I think that's really interesting that no one is talking
We're
about.
going to dive into this with Anna Wong. We will do that next with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is gearing up for coalition talks after his party lost its majority in parliament, forcing him to rely on allies to form a government for the first time since he stormed power a decade ago. Modi's BJP needs to secure the support of two regional allies to stay in office for a third term. More with Bloomberg Europe, Middle East, and Africa News Director Rosalind Matheson.
He does have these difficult negotiations going on today in New Delhi with two of his key alliance partners. And these are veteran politicians of big states who have pulled out of his alliance before and come back. So they're a bit fickle, one could say, and no doubt they're going to be ready to drive a hard bargain in order to promise their loyalty to him. They are saying publicly their intent is to work with him to form a government, but no doubt behind the scenes they'll be negotiating heavily to do so.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer sparred over taxes, the cost of living, and the country's health system in a televised debate. It is ahead of a July 4th election. President Biden's sweeping executive action on immigration took effect. It puts a cap on the number of migrants allowed to seek asylum, clearing the way for deportation. They are hoping the third time is the charm. Boeing will try again to launch its long-delayed space taxi with the vehicle's first human crew for NASA. It follows weeks of delays over technical issues and two called-off launch attempts. Astronaut Laurel O'Hara says while it has been a letdown for the crew,
you're just really focused on the duties that lay ahead of you, and you're ready for anything that might happen.
Astronauts Bush Wilmore and Sonny Williams hope today's countdown gets all the way to zero and liftoff just before 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You'll hear that live right here on Bloomberg. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Damian, thank you, Michael Barr. Damian, quickly here. What's so important to me is the range and being at resistance or support depending on the series. And I'm sorry, I got a 10-year real yield, 2.00%. We're there. This is, you know, all of a sudden the end of this week is a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
No, absolutely. And I think really at the end of the day, it comes down to that divergence between inflation and growth expectations. I mean, real yields obviously are important, but they're not just they're just not moving, right? So, I mean, it seems to me that the markets are kind of right in focusing on inflation because that seems to be the variable that has the most, I guess, the most juice behind it. Yeah.
Just down to 2.0004. We're almost to a 199 on the 10-year yield. NASDAQ up 0.7%. From New York City, Damian Sassower, Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures advancing after a private payrolls report pointed to a slowdown in the U.S. labor market that would allow the Federal Reserve to start cutting interest rates. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.7%, 133 points. Dow futures up 0.3%, 115 points. S&P futures up 0.4%, or 22 points. The yield on the 2-year, 4.76%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.32%, and that is little changed. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher at $2,342 an ounce. Brent crude, $77 a barrel. WTI crude, $73 a barrel. Taking a look at Bitcoin, up nearly 1% at 71,000. All right, let's get over to shares of Dollar Tree because they're lower. They're down nearly 2%. The company says it's looking into a possible sale, even spin-off of its Family Dollar business. It also reported weaker than expected comparable sales and cut its annual EPS forecast. eBay says it's going to drop American Express cards as a payment option because of unacceptably high fees. Amex says it's disappointed with that decision. We have eBay up 0.7%, Amex down about 0.1%. Apple shares ticking higher, up nearly 1%. That's putting its stock on track to gain for an 8th session in a row, its longest winning streak since March of 2022. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much. So much of the hallmark of what we do here on Apple CarPlay, on Android, on YouTube is a team that gets out front of the zeitgeist. People make fun where I talk about the zeitgeist, but anytime there's a cloud out there of thinking that is formed by people working in the trenches very hard. We don't make light of how hard our guests work. You just heard Tom Porcelli of PGIM mention the QCEW. Chew on that. It's some obscure labor report that only Anna Wong would study. And single-handedly, Dr. Wong of Bloomberg Economics has changed the zeitgeist, turned it on its head in the last 24 hours. We report with Anna Wong on a 1 million overshoot on the job economy. The numbers are going to be much lower, much more tepid. Anna Wong, congratulations on forming the zeitgeist globally in the last 72 hours. Is your report in the revisions to come of less job creation enough to change the Fed now or September?
Well, Tom, it really depends on when the true numbers is released, and the first hint that the Fed will have of the entire revisions covering April 2023 to March of 2024 would be just 2 days before Powell's August Jackson Hole speech. And in that report, we expect about 1 million downward revisions. And I think that would be enough to question and challenge their belief so far that in fact, the labor market's tight and they have time to wait until things actually weaken. In fact, things have been weakening. So I think it's a perfect catalyst for a September rate cut.
Around this is a birth-death model. I'm going to suggest, Dr. Wong, you're not the only fancy, smart person who's figured this out. Would you suggest the staff at the Eccles building has figured out much the same as you've written about for Bloomberg in the last 24 hours?
Well, in the FOMC minutes for the last meeting, we saw that Fed staff is currently forecasting unemployment rate to fall this year. And the kind of models that can generate a prediction of unemployment rate falling this year, rather as opposed to rising, is a top-down model using, VAR, conditional forecast, which is far, far away from the approach that would show a 1 million overstatement of non-farm payrolls. So it seems to me that the direction that the Fed staff is focusing, putting a lot more weight on, is taking data at face value and plugging it into a top-down model as opposed to really questioning the measurement issues that's plaguing the jobs
she
data
took,
right now.
she was with Steve Levitt of Freakonomics in Chicago, and Dr. Wong took Manners 101 in economics. She's not going to throw the Fed under the bus, but she's saying do some bottom-up work.
Well, Tom, for our audience, we have to define what the QCEW is. It's the quarterly census of employment and wages. It really does kind of crystallize the difference between the establishment and the household surveys. Obviously, non-farm payrolls, Friday's print is based on the establishment survey. Anna, 1 million jobs? Are you telling me that the establishment survey has been overstating the...
That's 80,000 a month.
I mean, that is nuts, right? Talk to us a little bit about what that means, and certainly what that means for the Fed calculus.
Yeah, Tom, especially you are very, close to economic history. And in economic history, there's this concept of creative destruction. And, during cyclical downturns. And that's what we were seeing last year is that the jobs closures has surged significantly. And also, new business formation has slowed also. So, however, BLS is still using these lagging predictions of firm closure and opening, because typically in normal times, little firms opening and closing generate a lot of churn in the labor market and accounts for as much as 40% of the total monthly employment. But in a situation, this cyclical turning point like last year, what we're seeing now in the data, in the QCEW data, is that in fact now we know that firms are closing, and as a result, that's produced this huge overstatement in non-farm payroll. As long as they keep using those.
Damian, jump in here. I can't state enough the importance of Dr. Wong's work in the last 48 hours. It's turned the industry on its head.
Tom, I mean, can you imagine the FOMC making decisions with the Fed funds rate based on data that is basically they're disregarding, that's wrong, that they basically need to revise based on revisions? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Anna, I'm looking at your Fed policy rate forecast going out to the third quarter of 2026. You're looking for a 3% Fed funds rate. I mean, forget about how we get there, but a 3% Fed funds rate. I mean, does something have to break in order to get there?
I'm assuming you're looking at to 2025. So for this year, we're still expecting 50 basis point cut, because I think it takes a long time for the Fed to realize and take on board the data, because the Fed said they're data dependent, and the danger of this data dependency is you have to wait for the revisions, and it wouldn't be until early 2025 where they would get the real data based on QCEW benchmark for 2023 and early 2024, and it will be until early 2026 where they get the full year of 2024 revisions. So it could be that they are, the sharp cuts will happen only in 2025.
Anna Wong, thank you so much, and congratulations as we get to jobs. The jobs day on Friday. Anna Wong there with really important work on 1 million jobs to evaporate on revision. I'm sorry, take 1 million divided by 12. I can't do the math.
No, it's
now,
the 3 million increase in non-farm
year.
payrolls last year. 1.3 million are due to the model. So I mean, that's 1.3 million of 3 million. I mean, that's not insignificant, Tom, for sure.
Well, we're going to have to say the least. Damon, we got to get the markets open. Futures up 23. Dow futures up 124.
Canada in 20 minutes?
People are cautious and all that, and the market just keeps doing it.
Loony.
There's just, I'm going to go to Lawrence McDonald. There's just a wall of money out there.
I'm going loony for the loony. 80% probability that they're going to cut in what?
Well, they like
20
to
minutes.
get out front. They really like to say,
but if you
we're
look
not
at the
linked.
ECB, it's 99%. We're only at 80% here, which means there's a lot of ambiguity about what the Bank of Canada is going to do in 20 minutes time.
Yeah, but I'm going to suggest Bank of Canada is more independent versus
I
the
agree
Fed
with that.
Versus the heritage of Duesenberg, Trichet, and Lagarde.
They showed a willingness to do the super hikes before the Fed
David
did.
Dodge.
Yeah.
That's good. You should see the Bank of Canada's tickets at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Oh. CIBC used to have great seats at MSG back when they owned a piece of that.
Did you get an invite from Luke Howell when he was with UBS up there?
No.
I never got the invite.
No. Luke's too busy. He's too busy cooking. You follow Luke?
He's got the dog.
Avid chef.
He's got a large life, Anyways, folks, here we are.
Long
and
hair.
need to get the markets open with futures up 23. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%. The 10-year real yield leveled 2.00%. Lower yields in store. From New York City, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, Damian Sassower, Paul Sweeney, and Alex Steele. They're awake. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Damian Sassower with your opening bell report. We had some more economic data pointing to a cool down in the labor market. Hiring U.S. companies grew in May at the slowest pace since the start of the year. A report from ADP shows private payrolls increased 152,000 last month. That was lower than expected. And this leads up to Friday's monthly employment report. So let's see the market reaction in midweek trading. We'll start off with the S&P 500 up about 0.4%, 23 points. The Dow up 0.1% at 80 points, and the Nasdaq up 0.6% at 114 points. We head over to the 2-year yield, 4.76%, down 1 basis point. The 10-year yield, 4.31%, and that's down 1 basis point. We have spot gold higher, 2,342 an ounce. Brent crude at $77 a barrel. WTI crude $73 a barrel. At the open, I want to check in with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, up 14%. It reported a jump in sales of servers built to handle AI. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Damian.
And Lisa, thanks so much. Moments ago, the 10-year real yield prints 1.99xxx. That to me is an important level. Kelvin Chan reports for Associated Press from the desk in London. I go to the third paragraph, which in journalism is the nut paragraph.
Yep.
I quote from the Associated Press. The Big Mac is a hamburger made of 2 beef patties, cheese, lettuce, onions, pickles, and Big Mac sauce, according to the company's website.
2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles,
Damian.
onions on a sesame seed bun. That's exactly right, Tom. But we're not talking about the Big Mac, the meat one. We're talking about the chicken Big Mac, which is what the EU General Court in Luxembourg did not give McDonald's the authority.
The 27-nation bloc said
We're talking
no
about a
way.
chicken Big Mac, and leave it to Europe to have a chicken Big Mac, right? I mean, how do you? It doesn't really.
It's un-American.
Un-American. But look, 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Yummy, yummy. I'm gonna get one this afternoon.
It's a chicken fried or grilled?
It's gotta be fried.
Supermax of Ireland portrayed the
Brennan.
decision as a David and Goliath style victory. Managing Director McDonough accused McDonald's of, quote, trademark bullying to stifle competition.
Unbelievable.
On the Big Mac chicken.
The Big Mac chicken, but not the meat.
Litigation
Not the beef.
ensued.
Sorry, the beef.
Phil Newhart saying, why did I come here? Phil Newhart joins right now, Director of Market Economic Research at First Citizens Bank, on a softening, it's a softening labor economy. Phil, I'm looking at the NASDAQ up 0.8%. I'm back to 5,300 SPX. The market seems immune from our economic angst.
Yeah, look, we're seeing normalization in the labor market. I think the market, good news is bad. That drives me crazy. I'm kind of with you on that, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, where we are is there's some normalization. I think the market, as long as Friday's payroll report comes in decent, the market says maybe Goldilocks is playing out, right? And we are seeing lower inflation.
Right.
Disinflation, hopefully, right? But at the same time, a little bit less heat in terms of the labor market.
And Tom Purcell at PGIM said decent is what their prediction is on non-farm payrolls.
Well, I think what's interesting here, Phil, and you point this out, is that the Fed's been on hold for 15 months already. I mean, that's the longest in however long. I mean, I don't know. You tell me, but it doesn't seem like they're ready to move anytime soon either. So, I mean, just how far can we go here?
Look, the Fed's on hold, right? And that's pretty clear. Next week, that's obviously going to be the result. Summary of economic projections is going to be pretty interesting. What do they do in terms of the dot plot? Obviously, at least one cut is coming out. My sense is that, look, we're going to be on hold for a while. The Fed came into this year pretty clearly wanting to cut. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, some outside their dual mandate. Well, now their hands are tied. Right, and they're making it very clear they want to see at least a few more good reports from an inflation perspective, which means they're on hold for now. This could be one of the longest periods we see the Fed on hold for some time.
Well, we just had Anna Wong in here, Phil, and she was talking about some of the, the underpinnings of some of the payroll data and, the birth-death model and the household versus the establishment survey. I mean, talk to us a little bit about, your understanding of that, but more importantly, the market's understanding of that. Does the market even care?
Look, the market right now is looking through all of this, right? I mean, it's looking at the next data point, and I really think that's going to be the focus. If Anna Wong, if that analysis is correct, and the labor market's been a little bit weaker than maybe we thought, maybe not quite as tight as we thought last year, maybe that is why things like the quits rate has come down, right, and come lower for some time now. Maybe other data was starting to see that, but we aren't seeing any crisis. Like initial jobless claims, right? We have to see that start to spike to say the labor market is actually truly worsening and not just normalizing.
Phil, what the pain we have is our perspective is 3 zip codes, and Damian's played every golf course within those 3 zip codes. Absolutely. What do you see in Raleigh, North Carolina?
Yeah, so look, in Raleigh, North Carolina, one, in terms of the region, growing incredibly quickly. Lots of population growth, et cetera. I heard you speak to a guest earlier in Florida. You're seeing people come from Florida to North Carolina. But the truth is, I talk to a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, and they're not feeling nearly as good as the mega caps, right? Inflation hits them more. They don't have as much excess cash. Higher interest rates hit them on their in terms of lending. The truth is, where the market is and sentiment out there are pretty different in my view.
Well, Phil, what's the feeling specifically in Durham, North Carolina? We don't have Mike Krzyzewski there to bail us out anymore. I mean, it's only Cooper Flagg. I mean, the Duke Blue Devils. Talk to us a little bit about prospects for your alma mater as we head into the 2025 season.
Look, we have a good class coming in. I'm feeling pretty good. Obviously, college basketball's changed a lot. So right now, one good class doesn't tell you much about the next year. But for now, things are looking pretty good
Is
for the
Sweeney
Blue Devils.
running this interview?
I mean, well, look, I'm making him jealous here because, there's UConn, there's Houston, there's some other ball clubs who are going to basically show their face up. But, I mean, Duke is looking tough. I mean, they've got a great class.
I think we're going to be pretty good.
There've been some, and look at them in football. They're actually competing, and they did well in the draft. And,
Danny Dimes, right?
That's right.
It's like real sports versus Vanderbilt.
All right, let's save the interview. Let's continue. Let's talk about inflation data. I mean, just how important is the CPI print? I mean, Gina Martin Adams was just on. She's more concerned with PPI than CPI. Right. Tomorrow we have the services ISM. We're looking at prices paid subcomponents. Talk to us about what you're looking for here.
Look, inflation, the risk is asymmetric at this point, right? We need CPI to continue to moderate. If we were to see upward surprise, that really blows up the Fed model. They're saying they want a few months of improvement. Well, 1 month does not make a trend. We're basically 1 month in. So that's going to have major implications for the market.
Right. 2-year yield, 4.76%. Yeah. What yield level on the 2-year begins to indicate that the money market fund hideout is over or diminished?
I think getting a 3 handle on the 2-year.
Really, you have to go as low as a 3.99.
I think you do.
Massive steepening.
Look at the volatility we've seen in the 2-year just from last fall.
Wow.
Right. I think a 3 handle is a mental break in the investor community.
A bull steepener. I mean, look, where are we? Negative 43 on 210, something like that. I mean, we backed all the way up here. So, I mean, I could see guys putting steepeners back to work. I mean, look, it seems to be the one consensus here is that the curve is going to steepen one way or the other. Bear, bull, you name it. So.
That's right. Yeah, it has to one day. I actually did an event in the city last night, and I got that question. But the truth is, I'm not sure it's anytime soon, right? If the Fed's on hold, the curve's going to remain inverted, right? So it's really how much is the Fed cutting? If they cut once or twice this year, why is the curve uninverted?
Not that we follow ADP as gospel. The fact is, ADP came in light. Mm-hmm. You got percolating out there revision stuff, like what Dr. Wong is saying at Bloomberg Economics. Do they get out front of that? My experience is they have to wait for headline data to say, okay, go.
I think they wait. I kind of wish they would get out in front of it, but I don't think they do. I think they're going to wait for the inflation data to cooperate in a real way. But they have to start thinking about both sides of their dual mandate, right? If this labor market data, which just is looking flat out looking softer, retail sales data looking softer, negative real personal consumption last Friday, if that data really is softening, they have to start thinking about the other side of their dual mandate and might have to have a more balanced approach.
Phil Newhart, Director of Market and Economic Research, First Citizens Bank and Trust Company. You have lunch plans today with a former colleague, do you not?
I do.
Where's Gina Martin Adams going to take you for lunch today? Is she going to spend
McDonald's?
a big
buck? Yeah, we're having a fried chicken Big Mac at McDonald's apparently.
What was it like working for the tyrant? She's tyrannical, but the tyrant. What was like? You were like 12 years old.
Yeah, I was.
You go in, she says, it's not just fundamentals,
right.
It's not just technicals.
That's right.
It's economics. What was it like, the fear at Wachovia?
I just came to the office, just my palms sweating every day, just terrified of Gina. No, it was amazing. Had the pleasure of helping her build out equity strategy at what was then Wachovia and became Wells Fargo. So one of my great mentors is Gina.
So is this with an HP 12C or using Fortran? What was
we
the
were definitely
methodology?
using Windows XP back then.
As for Avra, Avra's got a good lunch menu right here.
Yeah.
Midtown. It's the Rock Center, Avra. Yeah, that one's better right here.
Yeah, it's down at Rockefeller Center. It's like a piece
great
of
food. Good, it's good, healthy. It's healthy. Gino
Redo keeper of the Amex will be right there.
That's right.
To pick it up. Phil, thank you so much. Phil Newhart with us.
Thank you.
This morning from Raleigh, North Carolina. Some really, really good work. First Citizens Bank and Trust. Let's get a quote on McDonald's. Okay, why don't we do that?
MCD, baby.
Their earnings come out. We look at it. Lisa makes me look at it. But McDonald's there, $261. Okay. And in the last 10 years, a quaffing Big Macs.
Oh, big move here, though.
you're looking at a total return of 12.8% per year.
Yeah.
So, solid.
Yeah.
It's trading down.
It's got a big move this month. I mean, just last week, it's actually come roaring.
Well,
back.
there's some of that
Back
going. I
below
mean,
250.
look at Apple. I mean, Apple here.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know what happened here. They did this big share buyback and lifted up, and people said that's over. It was over for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and then boom, Apple. Are you ready? 195 with a 196 print earlier. It's been up like 18 of the last. It's like the Yankees. They haven't lost.
They don't lose. Well, I mean, look, we got to feed the ducks with a quack.
How's the Yankees pitching?
Oh, Reese Gill? Oh my God, he's not only going for Rookie of the Year, he might actually be a Cy Young candidate. I mean, and this kid was going to go back to AAA. Yeah, he was going to go back to AAA. He
almost went to the Detroit Tigers.
I mean, I think there's some stat out there that he's started and pitched in over 6 innings every game this year, and has no runs.
Yeah.
He's incredible.
Very good. A lot of history being made. A lot of fun being done at Yankee Stadium. The Dow up 38 points with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Tom, Damian, Lisa, thank you very much. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi won crucial backing from 2 key allies in his coalition, allowing him to form a government and extend his decade in power. Modi's party was forced into coalition talks following the BJP's loss of its majority in parliamentary elections. Leaders of the National Democratic Alliance met today in New Delhi to work out an agreement and give its backing to the coalition. Bloomberg's Menkha Doshi has the latest from New Delhi.
I think investors are coming to terms with the verdict and maybe even hoping that this could likely be a stable coalition because both the key alliance partners of the BJP, which is Modi's partner, have reiterated their loyalty to this coalition through the course of today. So they're expecting a stable government and policies similar to the policies of previous Modi governments.
Bloomberg's Menkha Doshi in New Delhi. Testimony continues today in the Hunter Biden gun case. Jurors have heard close to about an hour and a half of excerpts from Hunter Biden's memoir, read in his own voice.
I used my superpower, finding crack anytime, anywhere.
As the audiobook played in court, First Lady Jill Biden and Hunter's sister Ashley were seen fighting off tears. Beau Biden's widow is expected to tell jurors how she found Hunter's gun and why she was so concerned. The defense has suggested he was not using drugs when he bought the revolver. Boeing is hoping the third time is the charm. Boeing is hoping to launch into space for the first time this morning. Its Starliner vessel is set to take astronauts to the International Space Station. This is a test launch now. It's already been scrubbed twice within a month. The weather is looking pretty good. In fact, the weather alone is giving it a 90% chance of launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the first time Boeing is doing it with humans on board. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Damian, we're going to go to India here quickly with the news. We're going to do that here in about 3 minutes as well. But I just really can't say the sobering nature of the results versus the punditry and to bring it over to the American election.
That's right. I mean,
this fall, I just think is profound.
Well, I mean, Modi, this is the third time, I guess, as a charm, he lost the majority. The BJP, his party, lost their majority. But what's interesting is the 229 seats for the opposition bloc. I mean, that is not insignificant. So we're moving into this sort of dual-party mandate here in India.
Oh, we will talk about that. We're going to go to India here in a moment after the great work of Derek Wellbank through the week. He, I believe, is jetting back to Singapore as we speak. We have green on the screen, a VIX. Wow. 13.06 on the VIX. For global Wall Street, the 10-year real yield 1.99%. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks on the rise. ADP payroll data boost. Rate cut best right now with the Nasdaq up 0.7%. S&P 500 up 0.3%. The Dow is little changed. The 2-year yield 4.76%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.31%. That's down 1 basis point. What's moving the markets? We'll go to Stitch Fitch because they're up 40%. They posted third quarter loss that was smaller than expected. After the close, we'll hear from Victoria's Secret and also Five Below. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Thank you to our New Delhi coverage, Derek Wallbank and company, and of course those in New Delhi in very difficult climate change conditions with heat extraordinary as we look at the shock of the Indian elections. For those not briefed, Mr. Modi, the punditry, a certitude of majority, a certitude to win, even a certitude to advance and strengthen his hold on Indian politics. That didn't happen. Joining us now, Rishi Bhatia, South Asia economy editor for Bloomberg News. Rishi, my reading of this is an amateur and distant. This was a social message from the poor of India, a primal scream of the poor of India against the Modi government and Mr. Modi. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely right. The fight really this time around was on ground issues like high unemployment, on high inflation as well. Remember, India has a large youth population, and this youth population, despite the 8% growth levels that we're seeing in the country, is unable to get the kind of jobs that they really want. And it does look like that the fight this time around, as I said, was on ground issues, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist policies did not really work as expected.
Rishi, Sophie Landon in Le Monde in Paris wrote a brilliant essay comparing Nehru of 60 years ago to Mr. Modi. And so much of that is not the hope, but the possibility that Indira Gandhi and the Congress Party can have some form of resurrection. Is it possible Congress could resurrect over the coming months and years?
Well, they certainly have been able to get some vigor back, if I can put it like that. And part of it can be said on account of the nationwide unity yatra that the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi did just before the poll. So it does look like that they've been able, that's kind of resonated with the voters. And besides that, the fact that they've been able to cobble up support of over 20 other parties to stop the Modi juggernaut, that does, seem to suggest that the Congress party is kind of gaining steam.
Rishi, thank you so much. On short notice, Rishi Bhatia here with the shock of a Modi coalition. We'll continue to follow that out of New Delhi and Mumbai as well for Bloomberg News. People go, well, who is Barry Ritholtz besides the ginormous producer of Masters of Business, great conversations, longer conversations? And who Barry Ritholtz is somebody who does research based on statistics. It is classic Barry, as he looks at denominator bias, which is a statistical reality. Think the jobs report is one example, non-farm payrolls and all that. But Barry, you go over and with fury write about the angst over restaurants in America. You say the hand-wringing is just baloney, to borrow a phrase. Never. I haven't been in a restaurant where they serve baloney. Barry has.
So first of all, most of what the research we do, most of the analytical commentary is based on a question that comes from investors. And we've been very constructive the past couple of years. The economy has been robust, although we could talk about some signs of weakening that are starting to happen. But most of our responses are when a client says, hey, I'm really concerned about my long equity portfolio when hundreds and hundreds of restaurants are closing. And I love the phrase denominator blindness. Anytime you see a number lacking context, when you're just getting the top number of the fraction, the numerator. Like if someone tells you, hey, 30,000 layoffs,
Well, come on. The bottom line here, Damian, jump in here. Barry, the bottom line is the media loves the numerator.
Of course. And they don't tell you about the denominator.
And Damian, the heart of the CFA program is compare and contrast. You've always got to look at the denominator. Go.
Well, Barry, Fuddruckers, Pizza Hut, I mean, come on. What real tangible data points can we glean from some of that? I mean, is it useful? Can we trade on that data?
Well, I don't know if you can. You cannot trade on that data, which is probably the better option. But what the big takeaway is the reveal about sentiment. Right. So when someone says Fuddruckers is closing all of their locations, and the CEO has to come out and say, by the way, Fuddruckers acquired in 2022 all their locations, and the CEO says, not only are we not closing all our locations, we're actually growing. Other than a handful of underperforming locations we've closed, we're adding restaurants, we're adding revenue, we're adding profitability. You got to look at the crazy memes circulating through social networks and saying, this is just completely inaccurate. P.S., 10% more restaurants opened up in 23 than 22. The restaurant industry is actually doing well. So when someone says 500 restaurants have closed out of
Barry,
750,000.
Barry, just because of time, I got to do this. Everyone wants to know out on YouTube live chat, what is Barry Ritholtz doing about the congestion tax? Are you going to hit the FDR, go down and come up this West Side Highway? What are you going to do?
I am in favor of anything that leads to more roads being paved.
Oh, I agree
so
with
I
that.
can drive. And like every time I go to a car,
He's a Robert Moses kind of guy.
Right.
He has 19-inch rims.
Every time I go to 19, come on, 22. Every time I go to a Cars and Coffee and some guy with a Lambo has Montana plates, I say to him, hey, I like the car. It's a shame you can't afford it. What do you mean? Well, you're obviously ducking New York State taxes registering to Montana, and I'm driving over crappy roads because of you. Pay your taxes.
Joining
if you
us
can afford
now-
a Lambo, you can afford to pay the
you can afford
taxes.
a Hummer, but not a Lamborghini. Joining us now, surveillance congestion correspondent, after Governor Hochul has said, put a clamp on it. What do you think, John Tucker? Tell Barry Ritholtz.
Why at this moment? Like they didn't figure this out when it was first proposed that it would impact businesses in the Midtown area, especially small businesses. And also, there's an election coming up, and this is going to be a factor in the local elections.
Do you agree with that, Mr.
well.
Ritholtz? It is literally going to
I mean,
be
it
an election item?
was in the outer boroughs or whatever they call them in London as well.
So the real issue is this is taking place when all cities are struggling to recover from the post-pandemic work from home era, and you don't want to discourage people coming into Midtown and spending money. I understand you want to encourage people to take mass transit, traffic in the city. You know, it's the old Yogi Berra joke. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
But, I mean, hold on.
Every time I'm in Midtown, for a dying city, we're booming.
Are they really trying to discourage congestion in the city, or is it a source of revenue? Because for me, $15 to $20 congestion tax. I mean, how about $5? How about $5? But $20 if you go south.
But Damian, it starts off there, and every year, like every other toll, it goes up.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So what a starting point.
That was.
I mean, that's
an assumption,
not like
by the way. It's an assumption.
Captain Obvious.
The
Not
tolls
informed or denied.
into New York continue to go up, although it is still free to go over the GWB to New Jersey. So that's
going to be where it's going to go.
I don't think
When
so.
do we get a new book, Bear? I got to go.
Next March. I'm working on this coming March.
Good.
I'm about 3 months from putting in the final manuscript.
When you get it, folks, talk about denominator bias. This is where Barry and I are on the same page. Compare and contrast. Everything we try to do at Surveillance each and every day is relative to something else. It's not just to look at Damian Sassower's golf game. You've got to look at his golf game compared to the other people in the foursome, right?
Compared to history.
Compared to history. Damian, are you with me tomorrow?
No. Why, do you want me back? I
Yeah,
have a bat
of course
mitzvah I
you do.
have to prepare for. I'm sorry. I mean, I have to work on a speech.
gotta
I've
work-
got a lot to do.
Got a day
Are you
job.
up to date on your Haftorah? Are you ready to go?
I can do the Aliyahs. Sure.
All right.
I'm an Aliyah.
Very good. Thank
snob.
you. We continue forward here. They are in Nashville. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney will lead the discussion forward, and this with a nice lift to the NASDAQ, up a solid 0.8%. We've had a lot of fun today talking about one of the great jewels of New York City, Steve Tyrell. All he did with Rod Stewart, way back with Hooked on a Feeling and B.J. Thompson. Here is Steve Tyrell singing of his New York.
Some exotic booze at the bar in far Bombay. Come fly with me, let's fly let's fly away. Come fly with me, let's float down to Peru. In Lima Land, there's a one-man band, and he'll toot his flute for you. Come fly with me, let's take off in the blue.